into some pre-election news. Um, Welcome. This is my first time streaming on this channel, so hope you guys enjoy. I'm just going to be watching some videos, looking at some news related to the election. Please feel free to follow along. If you can, please keep the chat civil, no matter what kind of what political side of the aisle you're on. I would like to keep it low on arguments and name calling, ad hominem, that sort of thing. You can debate all you want, just keep it civil, please. Anyways, let's get into some news.
It is one poll. We have to remember that. But if it was just one poll that wasn't consistent with, as Simon has said, what we have been seeing for over 2 years now. You mentioned Kansas. Well, Kansas was the first state that illuminated the massive electoral force. You mentioned Kansas. Well, Kansas was the first state had become at that moment illuminated the early weeks after the Dobbs decision. Now to Iowa. It is actually consistent with other data.
Apologize, working out the kinks here. I think I did fix the audio now. I'm going to probably still be tweaking that a little bit, but we'll see how it goes.
Data we're seeing, but just at a high level, I want to say about that poll. Yes, it is one poll. We have to keep in mind, she is one of the most accurate pollsters out there. The way I look at that poll is even if there is a fairly significant polling error underlying in that poll, which there could be, to be clear, even good pollsters can miss. To be Harris +3, to miss by 5 or 6 or even 7 points, which would be a massive miss, would still be very bad news for the Trump campaign in a state that he won by 8 points last time around. And when I say it's consistent with other data we've seen, beyond the sort of overperformance that Simon has been talking about here since Dobbs, sort of consistently in every election, and how what you see in that poll result is consistent. In going through the early vote data, and this is data that we've just been pulling out, what we're seeing, interestingly, is bigger gender gaps and just huge surges among senior voters, senior Democratic-leaning voters, coming out in a lot of these states in actually bigger numbers than their total 2020 early vote. Remember, I said the total early vote nationwide is down by about 13%. So if any group is actually turning out in bigger numbers, we look at Georgia, where seniors have increased their vote by 35%. I'm sorry, that's Democratic leaning seniors. So again, that's actually consistent with what Ann Seltzer is finding in that poll. So I think there's a reason to certainly to pay attention to it.
Simon, now to you. I talked about some of the nefarious things we saw just in Iowa. You've been on the front lines early on of warning people about these nefarious betting markets. What we're seeing a change in these betting markets, not just the volatility that we're seeing, which doesn't go through any logical betting patterns. You also pointed out that these are crypto overseas exchanges where Americans aren't even able to vote, but they've actually now been changing their metric to who's going to be inaugurated in January, opening up the concept of coups may happen in the United States now. So there may be other opportunities. Even if we lose, let's open the betting exchange for the coup, but just go more comprehensively the bad faith, and we can target these, target smart these areas.
Yeah, no, I mean, no biggie, right? Like, just because she's winning the election doesn't mean she wins the election, right? Listen, it is the level of, if I can use this term, Ben, fuckery that we have seen from Republicans going back many, many years now. There can't really be any surprise about this, right? I mean, once you try to overturn an American election and attack the Capitol when all 435 members were there at the same time, you're capable of doing anything, right? I mean, so we crossed the Rubicon on this stuff, a few years ago, and we shouldn't be surprised when we are seeing now what we're seeing. And the first thing is the red wave 2024 is vastly bigger than red wave 2022. Red wave 2022, there were 40 polls. There's probably now over 150 polls that they've done in since the end of August, 30 different organizations. They did 75 polls in the last 8 days. Dramatic escalation. And let's be very clear about this. This escalation is a sign that they know the election is slipping away from them, because they've had to work much harder to try to create this false impression, this false 2024 red wave, that Donald Trump is winning the election. Why is that important to them? Because it's the predicate for them contesting the election this week. They want to have Donald Trump can only successfully pull off whatever he's going to try to pull off if his voters stay with him and his people who work for him stay with him, if the money stays with him. It's the second stage of his campaign. So what they're doing is they're talking to their own voters. Trump is leading by huge margins. Polymarket had him at 65%, right? Donald Trump keeps saying, I'm leading by more than I've ever led in polls before, right? These sort of very Trumpian kind of exaggerations. But it's there to create an impression among their voters that this is a blowout election. So when she wins, it will be obvious that we cheated, right? Because we've seen Polymarket, we've seen these polls, we've seen Real Clear Politics, right? The stuff is flooding their social media. These maps showing Trump with winning every state and all this stuff, all this false stuff. So they have created a massive propaganda disinformation campaign to tell their own voters they're winning when they aren't. And the way we know this is the escalation was required in order to counter the polls that were moving against them and the early vote data that was moving against them as we went to. This new thing you're describing is incredible. And Tom picked up on some of it. We were talking about this earlier. I saw it yesterday. They're now creating betting markets on who's going to be in the White House in January, not who's winning the election. And they're doing this for two reasons, right? One is it's going to continue to keep the drumbeat using this false system they're building that Trump is the legitimate winner of the election and should be in the White House. The second thing is they get to also keep the betting markets open. So they get to keep making money, right? By extending the election period to January. And so some of this is bad faith. Some of this is just greed, right? And that's driving this. But the key to all this, and I wrote about this over the weekend, is that we have to change all this. This can't be allowed to ever happen again. We have to change the way that we understand political data. It just cannot be the case in a democracy as important as ours that some random Brazilian firm drops a bunch of polls on the Sunday before the election, and all of us are told that we should take those polls seriously, right? It's fucking ridiculous. And it's an insult to our democracy. And the people who are telling us that this is a legitimate form of political discourse have to change their tune. It's outrageous what we're being asked to expect. Hundreds of polls, 30 different organizations, Polymarket, where Americans can't even influence any of the data. This is an outrageous affront, a liberal affront to our democracy. And we, after this election, have to be far more demanding of those that are creating the conditions for the hacking of our data system and our understanding of our own election. It's too important, our democracy, to allow this kind of horseshit to continue. And so we have a lot of work to do, Ben, on the other end after this election to really confront the people who've laundered this bad faith action and brought it into mainstream discourse in the country.
And when you think about it, it's really a misinformation engine. That's all it is. People see something, they think a certain way, and they go with that thing, right? So it's emboldening their followers while also hurting the faith and morale of the opposition, which is just wrong. Things should just be honest and fair.
Bring up one more good data point before getting your final remarks before Election Day. But from this final PBS NPR Morris poll showing Vice President Kamala Harris wiping out Donald Trump's lead among men. Trump down from plus 16 among men last month to just plus 4 now. Harris still leads among women by double digits. And I think you've seen with people like LeBron James and former President Barack Obama and others, the pro-democracy movement recapturing just being a man. And being a man means not putting people down and screwing people over and doing anything like that, and kind of recapturing the narrative from all of these, these MAGA folks. Let me ask you this, Tom. Who is what are you looking for on Election Day? What is your kind of final, what should people be looking for? So as you start to see the data roll in, what are you looking at?
Yeah, well, that's the great thing about the early vote data is it sort of narrows our focus and our understanding of what each campaign is going into Election Day needing. And, from the Trump campaign, we've covered this, but to clarify here, it just means that the voters who they said they were going to get out early, that was going to be what was going to reverse and sort of change the electorate in their favor relative to 4 years ago that wasn't favorable, was get out these young men. So that data that you just shared is problematic for them. And then to bring out these new registrants, lower propensity voters, they said they were going to get out and they haven't in the early vote. So that's the lift for them, which is really they're in as deep of a hole, if not deeper than they were 4 years ago, as Simon said. they've got to do something bigger. For Democrats, things are going according to plan. And so what they need to do is the younger voters, the voters of color, the gender gaps that we've seen since Dobbs, those voters who have told us we're intending to vote on election day, that gives the Harris campaign the opportunity to really put up some big numbers on election day. So, I'm going to be looking when that early vote data first drops in these states that count the early vote data first. States like Michigan, where they can count early. North Carolina is a pretty fast state. We'll be looking for signs in those results. If you checked against the baselines of 4 years ago, if you see Vice President Harris running even or outperforming in the counties that come in where they're completed faster, which again will be generally smaller and more Republican-leaning counties. If we see overperformance in those counties early, that'll be a very good sign for the Harris campaign. That's what I'll be looking at in the sort of first hour or two after polls close.
Simon?
Yeah, I mean, I echo everything Tom said. I think that I think we also have to sort of steady ourselves to recognize that we may really not, if it's really close, we may not know until Thursday or Friday, and people have to be sort of emotionally ready for that and not believe that by the time you go to bed, particularly if you live in the East Coast on Tuesday night, tomorrow night, that you're going to know what's happened. But if the election is trending the way that it is right now, and if the election is as we always believed it would be, where it was far more likely that we would overperform our polls than to underperform them because of all the dynamics we discussed earlier, then, you will start to see, as Tom mentioned, you'll start to see that in the performance in these counties that, can count their votes quicker. But there's going to be a lot that we don't know. And given what's happened, we all have to be careful and cautious to not jump the gun and to stick to our knitting, in essence, right? But I will just tell everyone who's watching, between Tom and I, we have more than 55, 60 years of experience in doing this kind of stuff. And our campaign feels like a winning campaign. It has the vibes of a campaign that's winning. Joyful candidate, extraordinary exuberance in the events, enormous ambition, creativity, right? Every day there's like new amazing stuff. Huge performance in the overperformance in the early vote, polls breaking our way, unprecedented amounts of money, all that stuff, right? And then look at the other guy. The guy which you document so well, Ben, here every day is just melting down, unraveling, embarrassing himself, is clearly in middle stage of some kind of dementia or something else. He has impulse control problems. He's starting to reference sexual stuff on stage on a repeated basis. It's crazy, right? We're closing unbelievably strong with joy. They're closing unbelievably ugly in every way imaginable. And so I just want to conclude by saying that based on everything I'm seeing, everyone I'm talking to on the ground, people on the ground are feeling it right now. I would so much rather be us than them going into these final day and a half. But what we need to do as citizens is to continue to do the work to keep driving this vote so that we reach the upper end of what's possible in our performance. Because not only is winning important, but so is the margin. And that's why whatever anybody can do here in terms of phone calling, canvassing, ballot curing, just go do it, right? Leave it all on the playing field. No regrets Tuesday night, no regrets. If you need places to donate money, come to Hopium. I've made some late recommendations. But folks, the power is in our hands now. We're having the election we all want to have, but we need to close out this thing, finish strong, and go win this thing together.
There you have it. Tom Bonnier, Target Smart, Simon Rosenberg, Hopium Chronicles. It should be noted that, when people are out there talking about the data, they're talking about Tom's data itself. And so when you have Simon, who's been doing this forever, Tom giving you the data that's actually trying to be used and manipulated, but he's telling you, let me explain to you what my data means. That's why we go to the source here at the Midas Touch Network. Thank you both. This has been incredible. You helping us through this coverage, and I'm sure we'll have you back soon. Although Maybe I don't hope to have you back soon. It's kind of like when I was a lawyer, it was like, you didn't want to necessarily give me a call when I was a lawyer, but I want to speak to you both right now. And for real, thank you for everything that you've done and you're doing. Everybody hit subscribe. Let's get to 4 million subscribers together. Have a good day, everybody.
Real quick, Meta just changed their algorithm to suppress political content. Please follow our Instagram at MeidasTouch right now as we head towards 400,000 followers so you don't miss a beat.
Gonna check out another video I was looking at earlier.
Vanna John Ralston, who has predicted news.
Election forecast with perfect record just made a stunning prediction. I saw a bunch of blue on that screen. I don't know if it's going to be that crazy, but we'll see what happens.
Major breaking election news. The Dean of Politics in Nevada, John Ralston, who has predicted correctly, every single presidential winner of the state for decades, has come out with his prediction for Nevada. I'm going to bring that to you in just a moment. There's more breaking news. Donald Trump, it is a day before the election. This is when the enthusiasm is the highest. I don't know how you're feeling. I'm feeling pumped. I am feeling pumped. We are about to elect the next president of the United States, and it's going to be Kamala Harris, the first female president of the United States. Donald Trump supporters, where are they? Because he held a rally at North Carolina earlier today, the day before the election. Look at, they wanted people to be there. No one's there. Look at this. It's just, that was yesterday, and this is today. Completely empty. You don't have to listen to me talk about it. Here's MSNBC.
Quickly show you here. We're in North Carolina. This is going to be his first stop. He's making 2 stops in Pennsylvania, Reading, and then Pittsburgh before finishing the night, as he did in 2016 and 2020 in Grand Rapids, Michigan. And I want to show you guys real fast what this crowd looks like, because Donald Trump was scheduled to take the stage at 10 a.m., and our Tony Butler is going to show you what this crowd currently looks like. We're looking at about a capacity about 70% full here. And for 9 years, I'm going to have Tony Pan to the right. For 9 years, we have talked about the enthusiasm in the masses that have come out for Trump's rallies time and again, even at his politically lowest points, including in 2022. But interestingly, and I can't tell you exactly why, but in this final week, we have seen far smaller crowds. We were in Greensboro, North Carolina, where just a few thousand people. Macon, Georgia, just a few thousand people yesterday. What does that mean? Ultimately, you can only discern so much from what crowd sizes look like. But interestingly, for the first time since I've been covering Donald Trump since 2015, there's been us in the press that have been looking around questioning why the crowd sizes have been less than what we are accustomed to. There are some people that have suggested that a great many folks have already early voted, so they feel like they've done their thing. They don't got to come out. Others have said, look, he's been to North Carolina so many times. It's essentially saturated.
Not even close to what's happening. That's just copium
At this point, but at this point in time, it's hard not to take any little clue that there is from early voting locations to the rallies where we're accustomed to seeing him draw thousands of people. Today, that's not so much the case. We'll see what the next 3 rallies look like, though, guys.
7,600 people was the capacity of that space. You could not fill 7,600 people. We are witnessing, I believe, the death of MAGA in real time. I'm going to tell you a quick story, and then we're going to get to this Nevada prediction. But I worked on the Bloomberg campaign in 2020, and I remember there's this feeling of momentum when you're on a campaign, okay? And leading up to the first debate, now you might not remember this, but Bloomberg actually had to get permission to get on the debate because you had to have a certain number of donors, and Bloomberg famously was his only donor. He only had 1 donor. So they changed the rules to get him on. He got on the debate, and you also remember the moment that Senator Elizabeth Warren took him out with 3 words, horse-faced lesbian. And I am telling you, up until that moment, every event we had was getting larger and larger and larger. And then after that moment, it was harder and harder to fill events. You can feel a before and after when you lose momentum and when a campaign is dying. That is what's happening. This is a dying campaign. It's a dying campaign. I don't know why the news isn't saying that, but that's exactly what we're witnessing.
Sir, you know why the news isn't saying that. They can't say, like, it's mainstream media. Come on, you know why they're not saying that.
Dying campaign, a dying movement. Thank God. Thank God. And that goes right well into what I'm going to say next. Here is Nevada. Of course, I'm sure you know what's going to happen if I'm excited about what he's about to say, but let's just get right into it. All right. I have been calling this the unicorn election because of the unusual voting patterns. It's really hard to know what will happen with mail ballots and election turnout with so many Republicans voting early. But here's what I do know. Both sides, at least people who understand the data on both sides, believe this will be close. That's because if past is prologue, in the mail ballot era, last 2 cycles, tens of thousands of mail ballots will come in between now and Friday, the deadline. It's a simple question. Can the Democrats catch up? Right now, they're a little bit below Republicans. It's really a coin flip. And I know people on both sides who have analyzed the data who can't decide. I have gone back and forth in my own head for days, my eyes glazing over the numbers and models and extrapolations. The key to this election has always been which way the non-major party voters break, because they have become the plurality in the state. They are going to make up 30% or so of the electorate, and if they swing enough towards Harris, she will win Nevada. I think they will, and I'll tell you why. Many people assume that with GOP catching up to the Democrats in voter registration, that the automatic voter registration plan pushed by Democrats that auto-registers people as nonpartisans unless they choose a party at the DMV had been a failure for the party, but I don't think so. There are a lot of nonpartisans who are closet Democrats who are purposely registered by Democrat-aligned groups as nonpartisans. Very smart. The machine knows who they are and will get them to vote. It will be just enough to overcome the Republican lead, along with women motivated by abortion and crossover votes that issue also will cause. I know some may think this reflects my well-known disdain for Trump. Heart over data. That is not so. I have often predicted against my own preferences. History does not lie. I just have a feeling she will catch up here, but I also believe, and please remember this, it will not be clear who won on election night here. So block out the nattering nabobs of election denialism. It's going to be very close. Prediction. Harris, 48.5%. Trump, 48.2%. So he is predicting that Kamala Harris, he has predicted, I'm going to repeat it again. John Ralston has predicted every correct presidential winner of his state for decades. And he is saying Kamala Harris is going to carry the state. Now, he could be wrong for the first time ever in his career. I don't think so. I think he knows what he's talking about. This, plus those Iowa polls and the crowds, it's all kind of like I said before on a previous video.
The truth is slowly coming out is what I think he's about to get at. Like, there's been a lot of polls that have been flooded with bad Republican data. And I'm not saying that Republicans are bad. I'm saying that they're skewed towards Republican, very red, very conservative polls that favor Republicans that are being considered, even well weighted. They're being considered in major polls that makes it look like things are neck and neck. Things based on the new evidence that's coming, especially in these last 3 days, are showing that it's not neck and neck. It's showing a very clear lead by Harris.
Everything's kind of blurry right now. We have blurry data, but I do think that things are starting to come in focus. And I really do believe Wednesday morning, Thursday morning, Wednesday evening, when the polls close and the votes are beginning to get counted and we start to see everything start to settle, we will look back at moments like this. We will look back at crowd sizes. We'll look back at the enthusiasm in Kamala Harris's crowds. The pundits are going to say, how did we miss it? How did we miss it? Well, I'm sitting here to tell you right now, we didn't miss it. We saw it all along. We knew that this was happening. We knew the polls were off, and we knew that Kamala Harris is on her way to becoming the first female president of the United States. And it's just hours away from happening. So if you have not voted, please just go vote. And if you have voted, text 4 people, make sure they voted. And if you've done that, then text 4 more people. I don't know what to tell you. Just make sure you got the vote, because this is super exciting. And I am just anxiously optimistic that we could actually pull this thing off.
I don't know what's wrong with you young people. You think you just fell out of a coconut tree?
Well, Michael, we're going to see.
Not the biggest fan of Ben Shapiro, but I'm curious of what he's talking about here in terms of why he voted Trump. I don't think he has a very good reason for voting Trump. Like, most people don't really have a very good reason for voting Trump, but we'll see. Let's see if he drops some numbers and some facts. If I have to fact check, I will, but let's get right into it.
See you on election night tomorrow night. We're going to be together, presumably for the rest of time, because that's how long it takes all of these states to actually count their votes. So we need you to rest up so you can be just as useless as ever, but you can push the Mayflower cigars and really do your thing. It'll be awesome. Folks, Michael, I'll see you tomorrow night.
All right, see you tomorrow.
Folks, we are going to be here tomorrow night, which is why you need to check out our trailer for tomorrow night. Here it is.
November 5th. The night America's fate is decided. As the final votes are counted and a nation waits for the outcome, join us to break down the live election results as only Ben Shapiro, Matt Walsh, Michael Knowles, Andrew Klavan, and Jeremy Borick can. With special guests appearing live in studio, Dr. Jordan B. Peterson, Dennis Prager, and Spencer Klavan. Daily Wire Election Night 2024. Get real-time results and exclusive insights from the most trusted names in conservative media. This is more than an election. It's history in the making. Join the Daily Wire as each vote is counted, each state called, and each race decided.
Well, folks, as you know, one last chance this time. It couldn't matter more. Get 47% off your new Daily Wire Plus annual membership with code FIGHT. 47% off as we rally behind the future 47th president, Donald Trump. Go to dailywire.com today. Join us as we fight the left and build America's future. Alrighty, folks. So it's down to the wire. It's the day before the election. According to the latest Real Clear Politics polling average, Donald Trump is up in national polling by 0.1%. Okay. In Georgia, according to Real Clear Politics, he's leading by 2.3%. In North Carolina by 1.5%. In Pennsylvania by 0.3%. In Arizona by 2.6%. And Nevada by 1%. Meanwhile, according to that same Real Clear Politics polling average, Kamala Harris is leading in Michigan by 0.6% and in Wisconsin by 0.3%. Well, suffice it to say, every single one of these battleground states is well within the margin of error. What does that mean? Well, it means a significant polling error in Trump's favor turns what appears to be a dead heat election into a blowout for him. And a significant polling error in Kamala Harris's direction turns it into a blowout for her. And the polls are all over the place. According to Atlas Intel, Trump is currently leading in every single one of the swing states. By contrast, according to the New York Times Siena poll, Trump is behind in Nevada, but ahead in Arizona, and all the other swing states are essentially dead, even with Harris up just like a point or two in Georgia, Wisconsin, and North Carolina. The bottom line is, nobody knows anything. As Nate Cohn of the New York Times points out, quote, across these final polls, white Democrats were 16% likelier to respond than white Republicans. That's a large disparity than our earlier polls this year. It's not much better than our final polls in 2020, even with the pandemic over. It raises the possibility the polls could underestimate Trump yet again. How about those early votes? You're hearing a lot about the early voting. Well, the early votes tell us pretty much nothing. They show the Republicans, unlike in 2020, when they idiotically told people not to show up early to vote, they've done a way better job than in 2020 of getting out the early vote. But those may be high propensity voters who are already going to vote for Trump. It's called cannibalizing the day of vote. Meanwhile, female voters are indeed showing up in droves, but the same story may apply for the Democrats. Those people may have voted day of, and now they're voting early. So everyone is now relegated to reading chicken entrails. When Ann Seltzer, widely respected as one of the best pollsters in the country, came out with a shocking poll on Saturday that had Kamala Harris leading Trump in Iowa by 3, Democrats erupted into spasms of ecstasy. At last, here finally was the evidence that Trump will be subdued. The Trump monster will be chained up and Kamala Harris will emerge victorious like a beautiful butterfly. But here's the thing. It's not quite that simple. So the Seltzer poll is pretty clearly an outlier. Emerson, for example, has Trump up nearly 10 points in the state right now. And Iowa is a Republican state at this point. The Republican Party has a registered voter advantage over the Democratic Party of some 173,000 voters. So here's the bottom line on that poll. We should take it with a giant grain of salt. Nate Silver says, quote, releasing this poll took an incredible amount of guts because, let me state this as carefully as I can, if you had to play the odds, this time Ann Seltzer will probably be wrong. So here's the bottom line. Stop reading the chicken entrails. Stop worrying about the polls. Go vote now if you have not already. So on Friday, I voted early, so did my wife, and I voted, of course, for President Donald J. Trump. Now, for the final time before the election, let me explain just why. Now, here's the thing. I want to explain why I voted for Trump, not to the ardent Trump voter. You already know the case for Trump, obviously, if you voted for him or if you're planning to vote for him. And I'm not explaining it to the person who believes that Donald Trump is a Hitlerian menace. If you believe that, forget about me connecting you to Trump. Nothing I say can reconnect you to reality itself. I'm addressing people who might have holdups about Donald Trump on character grounds, but like his policy. Or people who think that Kamala Harris is a change candidate for some reason. Or people who are worried about the supposed threat to institutions from Trump, but aren't crazy enough to stay up nights worrying about concentration camps or boxcars from a second Trump administration. For all you folks who are thinking about staying home, maybe you're wavering, I think it's necessary to explain my reasoning. After all, I went from somebody who did not vote in 2016 for either Trump or Hillary. That was my first time ever abstaining from a presidential vote because I felt that both were unfit for office. And then I voted for Trump in 2020. And then this year, I voted for, campaigned with, and gave money to Donald Trump. So there are essentially three reasons that I support Donald Trump. The first is Trump himself. The second is Kamala Harris. And the third is the institutions. Now, I'm going to go through them one by one. So let me begin by acknowledging many of the concerns of those of you who are hesitant about Donald Trump on character grounds. As you know from listening to the show consistently, I don't like a lot of the stuff that Donald Trump says. I'm not in love with the wild statements on Truth Social about various controversies of the day. I'm not voting because I care about his hot take on Taylor Swift or Robert Pattinson dating Kristen Stewart or something. I'm not big on the bull bleepery that Trump often bandies about with regard to topics large and small. So, for example, I think the evidence is skimpy. There's widespread pet barbecuing in Springfield. But here's the thing about Trump. Underlying a lot of the BSery is truth. This is just how Trump talks. He speaks in superlatives. He exaggerates for effect. He tells stories he's half heard, and then he repeats them in inflated fashion. That's what he does. That's why taking him totally literally is silly. But he's generally correct on the central point. So, for example, whether or not there's widespread eating of the pets in Springfield, illegal immigration is out of control, and it is changing small towns. The regulatory and tax regime of the Biden-Harris regime has generated historic inflation and burdened America with a future of economic stagnation. Joe Biden and Kamala Harris are unprecedentedly cowardly and weak on foreign policy. Here's the biggest thing. I'm not voting for Donald Trump because I need some sort of moral exemplar. I am not a child. I'm an adult human voter. I have plenty of people in my life I use as moral guides and sounding boards. I've got my parents. I've got members of my community. I've got great philosophers and thinkers I talk to regularly. To me, politicians aren't gods. They're not great leaders, at least not very often. They're plumbers. The question is whether they will fix the toilet. Donald Trump fixes the toilet. Kamala Harris throws a cherry bomb in it. We don't have to speculate about this. We know it's true because Trump has already been president. And he was a hell of a lot better than Kamala Harris has been as vice president. So let's talk policy. Let's begin with general governing worldview. Donald Trump believes that America's founding principles are great. When he says make America great again, that's what he means. He means America's founding principles, we should restore them. He doesn't believe that America was built on racism and sexism and bigotry and homophobia and all the rest of that litany. He believes America is a land of opportunity for everyone and should be. He doesn't identify winning with exploitation or losing with victimhood. He doesn't believe in the morally idiotic oppressor-oppressed matrix, by which we can determine solely based on someone's failure whether society has been mean to them. This, by the way, is actually the great battle of our time, because as we will discuss, Kamala Harris is an ardent devotee of wokeness, the belief that those who fail are oppressed and those who succeed in America are oppressors. That worldview means incentivizing failure and punishing success in every area of human life. I've called it the morality of scavenging before, and that's what it is. So what does that mean? Well, it means that Donald Trump generally believes in economic meritocracy. Now, if there's one thing you know about Donald Trump, the dude loves winning. He's all about winning. We know it, right? Like it or hate it, that is his gauge of success in every endeavor of human achievement. What that means is that generally he values merit. So, for example, he wants an economy where innovators and entrepreneurs like Elon Musk are given the freedom and incentive to take us to Mars. Not an economy where Kamala Harris's Department of Justice sues Elon Musk for failure to hire enough refugees or immigrants on new visas. Donald Trump wants an economy where businesses are worried about creating the best goods, products, and services for the lowest price, not about the dumb regulations coming from the EPA or the diversity, equity, and inclusion regime of the corporate office. This is why Donald Trump wants lower taxes and less regulation and more dynamic business as a result. So what about all the talk about tariffs? Yes, tariffs are generally bad economic policy, but Trump is transactional. Okay, this is his thing about tariffs. Look how he did it in the first term. He uses tariffs as a way to cudgel other countries to behave according to the basic rules of the road in international markets. Tariffs, he thinks, I think correctly, are a great way of ensuring that countries like China don't simply dump endless amounts of money into industries that threaten American safety while stealing American technology. And Trump isn't wrong about this. This is why Donald Trump had a thriving economy. Wage growth beat inflation over his term by 15%. Inflation grew at just 1.9% per annum, which is below what the Federal Reserve seeks, which is about 2%. There's a reason people are nostalgic for the Donald Trump economy and really don't like the Biden-Harris economy. Now, because Trump is not a devotee of the evil oppressor-oppressed matrix, he knows that other countries have interests that are not ours. When Donald Trump says America first, he doesn't mean isolationism. I know that because he told me that on this show, and you heard him do it. He doesn't mean Charles Lindbergh or Father Coughlin. He means that America's interests ought to be first and foremost, and that very often those interests can be protected only through the credible threat of the use of force. Donald Trump innately understands deterrence. I've told this story before, but it's worth telling it again. So I held a fundraiser for Donald Trump a few months ago, and he told this story. Here's what he said. He said, "You want to know why Vladimir Putin never invaded Ukraine on my watch? Because I called him and I told him, Vlad, don't you do it?" And Vlad said, "Vladimir," he said, "why not, Mr. President?" And I said, "Because Vlad, if you do, I'm going to bomb the bleep out of you." And he said, "No, you won't, Mr. President." And I said, "Well, I might." So then Trump turns to me, and he knows exactly what he's doing. He says, quote, "And you know what? If there's even a 5% chance the U.S. military, the most powerful military in the history of the world, is going to bomb the bleep out of you, you don't do it." See, Trump knows that innately, which is why the world became far more peaceful under Donald Trump. China, for the first time, saw perhaps it didn't have a patsy in Donald Trump. Believe it or not, bipartisan opposition to Chinese aggression grew radically under Trump. Democrats went anti-China under Trump. Russia did not invade Ukraine under Donald Trump. They kept calling him a Russian tool. Russia did not invade Ukraine under Donald Trump. It did under both Joe Biden before him and Joe Biden after him. And of course, while Obama and Biden radically incentivized the growth of the evil terror regime in Iran, it was Donald Trump who contained Iran, impoverished it, brokered the Abraham Accords, the first blossoming of peace in the Middle East in decades. Trump gets it. Okay, so that's the positive case for Trump. That's why I'm voting for Trump. Now, the case against Kamala, why I'm voting against Kamala Harris. So here's the thing. Kamala Harris, it's hard to demonize her because she's not important. She's not an important figure in and of herself. She's been an empty vessel literally her entire political career. She's actually not good at the game. I know people try to portray her as good at the game. She's great about, no, she isn't. She couldn't speak straight to the point if her life depended on it. She spews a ghastly word vomit that would put the fat kid from Stand By Me pie eating contest to shame. She vacillates wildly between insane leftism, like when she ran for president in 2020, to faux hawkish, tough on crime prosecutor. That's what she's been trying to do in this campaign. And none of it washes. It's all totally fake. She's insincere. She's charmless. She's terrifically inauthentic. She's the polar express of political candidates. She inhabits the uncanny valley full time. She bought a full-scale vacation home there and she lives in the uncanny valley. She surrounded herself with other residents of the island of misfit, cloying, and uber-irritating tools. Doug Emhoff, her allegedly nanny impregnating, religious Jew impersonating, allegedly ex-girlfriend slapping husband. Tim Walz, pretend Ultraman. Who pretends to be a gun fanatic but can't load one, who play acts of being a football coach but can't even use football terminology properly, and all the rest of this ridiculous crew. And, of course, Kamala Harris would not be there if she weren't just a tool of the Democratic machine. She was put in place in 2020 by Barack Obama and the rest of the Democratic upper echelon.
Okay, what bothers me about this kind of stuff is that he's saying Ben Shapiro's a really good talker. He's a pundit. He's very, very smart. He's very, very educated, college educated. He understands rhetoric. He understands narrative. I just don't understand why he's saying all of this stuff when a lot of it can be applied to Trump and isn't even necessarily true of Harris. Like, what's the point of like painting this person, like her, so badly? She's nowhere near as badly as people paint her. I get it if she's not your candidate, you don't want to vote for her, but like all of the lies it's just ridiculous, man.
Who decided that Joe needed a woman of color on the ticket. Then, after she failed dramatically as vice president, most unpopular VP in modern American history, she failed at every job she was given. Then she was jabbed into the presidential nomination by the same machine, which suddenly realized that Joe Biden's brain had died some years before.
Okay, wait. So is Trump not a part of the machine? Isn't that why people kept propping Trump up, even though they knew that he was severely unqualified? I don't understand this narrative.
Kamala Harris is not Joy. She is not Brat. She's an empty pantsuit, and she always was. Always. Dating all the way back to Willie Brown. But that doesn't mean she isn't dangerous, because, like Joe Biden, she's actually just an inept weather vane for the Democratic Party as a whole. And that party has embraced the failure and radicalism of its most insane members. Well, folks, as you may know, we have a big election coming up. Let me tell you, there's a lot at stake. If Kamala gets into office, it's like throwing gas on a dumpster fire that's already visible from space. Here's what you can do right now. Protect your savings by diversifying right now into gold from my friends over at Birch Gold. That's right. For millennia, gold has stood firm in the...
Okay, I get that he has his sponsors and stuff like that, but holy crap, are you really gonna are you really gonna slide that into one of your ads? Like, come on, man.
Face of greedy governments, economic upheavals, and global strife. It can protect you right now. Birch Gold will help you convert an IRA or 401k into an IRA in physical gold. The best news, it's not going to cost you a penny out of pocket. Think about this for a second. In the past 4 years, while the buying power of the US dollar has been declining faster than CNN's ratings, the price of gold has increased 40%. Is that a coinky-dink? Nay. So here's what you need to do. Text Ben to 989898. You'll get your free info kit on gold, and then you can diversify. As the exclusive gold partner of the Daily Wire for the past 8 years, you can trust Birch Gold as I do to protect your savings. Do not wait for the election results to start thinking about your financial future. Text Ben to the number 989898 for your free info kit today. That's Ben to the number 989898. Again, we've been working with the folks over at Birch Gold for a really long time. Give them a call, ask them all your questions, and then when you feel secure, invest. Text Ben to the number 989898 and get in touch with Birch Gold today. Also, Sunday, November 10th, big moment. It's the epic return of Yellowstone. It's only available on Paramount Network. The wait is over, folks. The television phenomenon at 8/7 Central States, who currently constitute a majority of college graduates. We just label them victimized because historic victimization is enough. For other groups, even evidence of current victimization must be ignored so long as members of those groups are disproportionately successful. And here I'm looking at Asians and Jews. Asians can be barred from college because, of course, they are white adjacent. And Jews, despite being the most targeted group in America by hate crimes on a per capita basis, they're too successful. They're actually victimizers. Well, this is an evil worldview. It incentivizes failure. It punishes success. It treats people not as...
Hold on. I don't have the full context of what he's saying, but to say that victims can't be victimizers is also incorrect. There's a regular cycle that happens on a regular basis that goes back and forth between the victims and the victimizers. Okay, I don't have to go down the whole history track to explain this, but it's historically true.
Individuals, but as members of classes. It is entirely 100% grade A anti-Americanism. It tears Americans apart on the basis of identity, on the basis of characteristics they can't control. And no, it is not going away. She's trying to hide it, but is the essence of her entire campaign, which treats women and men as enemies. This campaign has been so anti-male, it's insane. I mean, from the ads that say that women should lie to their husbands and have to lie to their husbands, to the trotting out of the lie that Donald Trump and all of his supporters somehow want to make it so that...
Hold on. So he said that the anti-male, because women have to lie to the women on the Republican side, specifically the conservative side, they have to lie to their husbands because if they don't, their husband may make them vote the same way as them. So if they want to vote differently, yes, they have to lie to their husbands or face the consequences, which is disenfranchisement, which is factually un-American and not non-democratic. So I don't know what you're talking about here, Ben. I know you tried to gloss over that, but that's why I'm here to say no and give the facts about that. Thanks.
Women can't live in America is like a line they use repeatedly. This campaign ignores hatred of Jews so long as it comes from intersectional communities. There's a full-scale terror attack in Chicago by an illegal immigrant who was Muslim, shouting Allahu Akbar, and the Kamala Harris campaign had nothing to say. And this campaign promises endless benefits, including the very redefinition of reality to marginalized groups. That's how Tim Walz ends up stumping for tampons in the boys' bathroom, pretending boys are girls as a sop to a marginalized group. This is how the Biden-Harris White House has repeatedly attempted to enshrine racism in law. It's why Kamala Harris, for example, has suggested like $20,000 giveaways to various racial and ethnic groups. Okay, that is racist, and it's wrong, and it's violative of the Constitution. Harris's economic policies are rooted in the same worldview. So are the Democratic parties as a whole. Thus, businesses that are successful are definitionally, according to her and her party, exploiters. They should have their wealth expropriated and spent as Kamala Harris and her friends see fit. They've never run a business, by the way, so they have no clue how to spend money, but they're going to spend it better than business people. And they're going to spend it on groups they seek to politically cultivate. Regulations are simply ways to establish equality of outcome. Innovators must be punished as oppressors. They're bad. The rich are seen as a separate class from everyone else, despite the fact that income mobility remains the hallmark of the American economy. Again, I know many, many, many rich people. I'm talking billionaires. Virtually none of them started even as millionaires. This is one of my bugaboos. I hate this, okay? This basic idea that there is like the rich and then everyone else. In my life, I've gone from very not rich to very rich. I'm the same person. There may be a point in the future where I go back from very rich to not very rich again. That is how it works in an income mobile economy. But everything is based in this Marxist lie that there are classes in American society that are uncrackable and unshakable, and so the system has to be torn down. The answer to everything for Kamala...
That's not necessarily true. Not that it's uncrackable or unshakable, but there are definitely more opportunities afforded to the rich. Think about it. If you're rich, you can get a credit card that gives you benefits to help you save money. But if you're middle class or poor class or lower class, there are credit cards that you cannot obtain, which with the benefits would help you more as a lower class citizen who actually needs benefits like that to save money. But you can't get access to those because you don't have the money. That's a perfect example. Now, obviously, everything doesn't get wrapped up in credit cards, but there are more opportunities afforded to those who have more money. There are things that middle and poor class people don't even know about. There are things that, as I started to move up from my lower middle, poor, low to middle to slightly central to upper central class, that I didn't know about. I had to learn about that from reaching that level and saying, oh, wow, this is a thing. Financial things, types of bank accounts, all sorts of things that poor to middle class people don't even know about. And honestly, they don't have the time to think about because they're busy just trying to make it on their own. Everybody is not an innovator. Everybody is not going to be a pundit. Everybody is not going to go to college and create a YouTube channel that makes them millions of dollars. Everybody's not going to be a journalist. Like everybody has different paths in life. The point is, even if you're a lower to middle class, you should still be afforded certain opportunities, and it shouldn't be so hard to make a basic level of living. I think that's what that's about, right?
Harris and her team, control, top-down control, higher taxes, more spending, more regulation, giveaways, takings, borrowing. That's Kamala Harris's program. And that's why Joe Biden brought about 20% inflation, the worst inflation in 40 years. It's why inflation outpaced wages for the vast majority of his tenure. It's also why even before...
The reason why inflation outpaced wages is because large corporations saw that they could use inflation as an excuse and increase their profits. If you don't believe me, go look up the profit margins of most major corporations, including food. Okay, like especially food. Look at the housing market and look at how they used the fear of inflation, or the reality actually of inflation, to basically bake their record-breaking profits into them.
Joe Biden launched his massive spending initiatives. His White House forecasts stagnating growth a decade into the future. Okay, understand, that's not a bug of the Democratic program. That is a feature. They would rather have equality in stagnation than inequality in prosperity. And now, extend this crap worldview to the realm of foreign policy. The woke ideology means weakness and surrender in the face of foreign predations. That's what it means. It treats muscular and self-confident American defense as a weakness and cowardice, and surrender as a virtue. Kamala Harris says she was the last person in the room on Afghanistan. You know what? I believe her. Both she and Joe Biden still brag about the worst foreign policy embarrassment of our lifetimes. The pullout from Afghanistan was hideous. It was ugly. It was un-American, in which billions in military equipment was left behind for the Taliban, one of the worst groups on earth, as erstwhile allies, people we had worked with and given promises to, were hunted down by the Taliban or were falling off wheel wells at Bagram Air Base. A pullout in which 13 American service members were blown up while they were trying to help innocent civilians escape. A pullout that ended with 19 million women stuffed into burqas in basements, deprived of any hope of a normal or decent life, and with no capacity for us to do anti-terror operations anywhere in the region. They were lying the entire time, our over-the-horizon capacity. It didn't exist. It was the weakness in Afghanistan that led Vladimir Putin to invade Ukraine. And Joe Biden's first move, by the way, was to offer Vladimir Zelensky a plane ride out. Then Joe Biden and team pursued the dumbest foreign policy available, a commitment to unspecified victory while slow walking the actual aid that might attain something resembling it. Meanwhile, the Chinese are on the move. They've been building steadily in the South China Sea, increasing the actual building of military bases in territory they don't own, threatening Taiwan, moving forward with every possible aggressive act short of war. Move on over to the Middle East. It is the same story, except much worse. Joe Biden came into office. He immediately alienated the Saudis and the Israelis, our actual allies in the region, in a misguided attempt to establish parity with Iran, simultaneously freeing up billions of dollars to Iran to spread terrorism and build up ballistic missile technology. All of that culminated in the current 7-front war launched on Israel, our ally, by Iranian proxies, which began with the slaughter of 1,200 Israelis and the kidnapping of 250 people, including American hostages, on October 7th. So what did Joe Biden and Kamala Harris do? They slow-walked aid to the Israelis. They criticized them. They said that it was the Israelis who were doing terrible things. They undermined the government of Israel openly, attempting to oust the sitting prime minister of Israel. They openly threatened Israel with cutoffs in military shipments. They're doing it right now, literally right now. They're threatening a full cutoff in military shipments to Israel by November 13th if they don't take Joe Biden and Kamala Harris's advice on fighting Hamas or Hezbollah or Iran, advice from dullards. And most of all, Joe Biden and Kamala Harris have been total, utter, complete cowards in standing up to the massive tsunami of Jew hatred that has emerged from their own support base. They've said nothing about Rashida Tlaib, nothing about Ilhan Omar, nothing about what's happening on college campuses, nothing. They have nothing to say about it. They'll say, obviously, well, we don't want people, messing up the university, but they will never say.
No. They said nothing about them because what they did was not actually anti-Semitic like he's trying to paint it as. He's a very good, he's really good at painting a certain narrative, but that's why they're not saying anything about it, because it's just not true.
Say that what these people are protesting for is wrong and bad and evil. Instead, Kamala Harris and company have implied that Israel is the problem, that Israel is committing a genocide, which it is not, and that those protesting American support for Israel have a solid case. She has said that herself. And then, of course, there's the border, which really is a foreign policy issue, because Kamala Harris believes that America is rooted in xenophobia and racism. She has presided over a wide open, unprecedented in the history of the country. There are only 2 reasons anyone in high office would open the border this wide. First, in order to change the voting demographic of the country. I'm just speaking logically here. These are the only reasons you would do this. Second, because they believe the United States somehow owes citizens of other countries residence in America because America bears some sort of blood guilt for everything.
Okay, no. It's not about America bearing a blood guilt. Okay, on the first point, he's literally lying. The people who are coming into the country can't vote, not until they become citizens in the far. Like, they can't vote. It's not going to affect anything now. They can't vote. They're not opening up the border so that people can come in. Yes, there is a border crisis. There is a border issue, but it's nowhere near at the level that Republicans try to make it look like it is. Okay, that's why it's the main thing that they're running on, and that's why they're spinning these ridiculous lies. Okay, to the second point, what was that he said? He said, that we owe a blood debt, right? No. America was founded. We are a country of immigrants. We were founded on immigration. We were founded on being a place where people can come and have opportunity to live the American dream. Even though the American dream was originally something written to be basically a lie, so the rich can continue to get richer. I'm not going to hit on that. Let's talk about the dream of what the American dream should be. The gates or the borders are made to allow people to come in to give them opportunity and make the country more diverse. The reason why a lot of people in the Republican Party are upset about this is because they don't want the country to be more diverse. They want it to be white. Case in point, Trump literally said that they're poisoning poisoning the blood of our nation. Yeah, read deeper into what that really means.
Happening around the world, which is an aspect of wokeness. For Kamala Harris, probably both are true. Okay, finally, the third reason I'm voting for Donald Trump is because of the institutions. Now, I know, for those who are moderates, who are thinking about Trump, who are a little wary, I know this one seems to boggle minds because everyone on the left talks nonstop about January 6, 2021. I get it. Thanks to Donald Trump's legal and public relations maneuvering between November 2020 and January 6, 2021, this is where the left has made their hay. Now, listen, I saw no evidence of Trump's contentions at the time on electoral fraud, on widespread electoral fraud. I said so. He had every right to challenge this stuff in court. He had to show the evidence. I didn't think he did. I thought his statements about Mike Pence's ability to single-handedly refuse to certify votes from the states was both morally and factually wrong. By the way, I thought
I'm so glad that he at least has the freaking spine to say that.
January 6th was morally wrong as well, and tragic. Although, to be sure, many of the people who are prosecuted have certainly been over-prosecuted. I know some of them. There are people who have been prosecuted to the full extent of the law for basic trespassing into the Capitol in ways that BLM rioters who were burning down cities were not. But listen, Donald Trump is not the threat to the institutions of the United States. Here's the thing that nobody wants to talk about with regard to January 6th, 2021. There's another date that happened, January 20th, 2021. Okay? And that's when Donald Trump left office. All the institutions survived Donald Trump with flying colors. Those who say there wasn't a peaceful transfer of power in January 2021, they are lying. They're lying. A riot that was in January 6th does not mean there was a non-peaceful transfer of power. That's not how transfer of power works. Okay?
Wait, hold on. We're lying because we said that there wasn't a non-peaceful, that there was a non-peaceful transfer of power, or there wasn't a peaceful transfer of power. People died. That's the opposite of peace, maybe? I think that's all I got to say.
Okay? There was. That is why Joe Biden took office without a military operation. It's why Donald Trump left office as constitutionally specified. Right?
After people died. Okay.
He wasn't holed up in the White House like Al Pacino in Scarface, snorting bags of coke and saying hello to my little friend. That's not what happened. The Constitution.
It's so funny that you used that when he literally compared himself to Al Pacino recently. Anyways, the rhetoric and the narrative is really good, Ben. It's really good for your supporters, but everybody's not that stupid. We saw what happened, okay?
Constitutional checks and balances held up. And here's the thing. If Donald Trump were to win, those particular checks and balances would never even be implicated, specifically because Trump would have won. There would be no further challenge to an election. Democrats have far graver plans for our institutions, and they say it openly. What's worse, they also plan to uphold the power of institutions that totally lost their legitimacy and should actually be torn down. So let's start with the institutions that need to be preserved, and who is the threat to them. Let's start with the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court of the United States remains a bulwark institution in our constitutional structure, of course, and so long as it is doing the bidding of the left agreed. The power of judicial review is embedded in all of our legal structures. But it was Democrats who killed the judicial filibuster and then whined when Mitch McConnell did the same in order to confirm Trump's Supreme Court nominees. It is not Republicans who threaten the Supreme Court. It is Kamala Harris, who has pledged to kill the filibuster to try to pack the courts or institute term limits. The Supreme Court is no longer the plaything of the left, thanks to Donald Trump. And so the left is going to take its ball and go home, meaning they just want to wreck it. They want to destroy it. You see them doing this on a day-to-day basis. They tell about how the justices are corrupt. They're not. They talk about how the justices need to be termed out. Name the justice. They didn't feel that way about Ruth Bader Ginsburg. Then there's Congress. Start with the Senate. Kamala Harris has already said she would kill the filibuster in the Senate, thus allowing controversial legislation to pass with a bare majority, with 51 votes. Okay, now, that is a bad idea. The reason that's a bad idea is because the founders created a system of checks and balances that requires near unanimity in the United States in order to do big things. That's good, because the status quo ante generally is what most Americans like. In order to make a big change, you should have to have, like a big and durable majority. Democrats want to get rid of that. They want a bare majority in the Senate to do big things. Presumably, this would include the creation of 2 new states, Washington, D.C. and Puerto Rico, in an attempt to add 4 new Democratic senators, thus permanently stacking the Senate in favor of Democrats. They also want to ram through the so-called Equality Act, which is an LBGTQ plus minus divided by sign giveaway. It's really a grave violation of religious liberty. They want to ram through the John Lewis Voting Rights Act, which federalizes election procedures and loosens protections against fraud and ballot harvesting. They want to push all sorts of other radical pieces of legislation. By the way, it was Democrats who started the process of barring Republicans from committee assignments in the House. Look for them to continue that practice and exacerbate it. How about the Department of Justice? So there's been tons of talk in this election cycle about how Trump will weaponize the DOJ against his enemies. Here's the thing. He was already president, and he didn't. Remember that time when everybody at his rallies was chanting, lock her up, about Hillary Clinton? You know, it's a thing that didn't happen. Hillary Clinton being locked up. Joe Biden was not investigated by the DOJ under Donald Trump. But Joe Biden has activated the DOJ personally against Trump. Not that he's activated it personally and made the call, but he has activated it against Donald Trump personally. Democrats would certainly use the DOJ to target any political opponent they could.
Sorry, when did he... Why does this guy... He says so... He fits in these little lies in the middle of his talking if it continues on like he didn't just lie. Biden has never weaponized the DOJ against Trump. If you're trying to talk about the raid that happened in his house, that was not Biden. Come on, guys.
Could, as they have Donald Trump. By the way, that would only be the tip of the iceberg. The dirty secret is that this is nothing new. Barack Obama's IRS targeted his opponents as well. The executive branch is large, and it is powerful, and it is Democrats who have used it against their opponents. Kamala Harris would also be an opponent of federalism. The American system is built, again, on the idea of consensus, which means most things happen at the state level. Okay, that's good. Democrats don't want that. Many people are worried about the implications of the Supreme Court overruling Roe versus Wade. But all that did is send the issue of abortion back to the states, where it started in the first place. Democrats want to refederalize abortion, have the federal government regulate it, and then they want to do the same on nearly every issue. Democrats see the states, at least red states, as the enemy. They want a homogenous rule of law all over the country. They want the entire country governed like California. There are few policies better prone to lead to a breakdown of the United States itself than doing that, than coming after the states. And then, finally, there are the institutions that matter most and require preservation. Church and family. What Edmund Burke called the little platoons of society. These are the institutions that actually build social fabric. You know, the places where we make friends and share family, where we build lives together. The lives we actually live together, right? We don't spend most of our day reading the congressional record. We spend most of our day being with our family, being at church, meeting members of our community, doing things for them, doing things with them. Kamala Harris's federal government vision crowds these institutions out. Churches, in the Kamala Harris view, so long as they're not just propagandists for the progressive worldview, flying LGBTQ plus minus divided by sign flags instead of, the cross, are barriers to the rule of the elite. They have to be torn away. They should be targeted with tax law. They should be broken in favor of abortion on demand. It's Kamala Harris herself who said no religious exemptions with regard to abortion law. Catholic charities should be forced to participate in the abortion machine. Families, too, are a danger. They might, in fact, re-inculcate traditional virtue.
I'm sorry. I'm sorry. He said that people are forced. I think that the two opposite sides of the abortion issue are pro-life and pro-choice. Not pro-take life. Pro-choice. Which means you have the choice. Which means it's not forcing anybody to do anything because it's giving you the choice to do it or not do it. That's what choice means, Ben.
Virtue. Yeah, there's nothing new in this. The left has always seen families as little repression chambers for traditional value. Thus, federal policy has to favor the destruction of the family in favor of values taught by, say, Randy Weingarten at the National Education Association. Children actually have to be protected from their parents because parents are bad. Parents might be religious. Parents might have traditional values. Instead, they have to be indoctrinated by members of the state so they can emerge from the chrysalis of left-wing values a full-fledged butterfly of wokeness. This is precisely why Tim Walz's Minnesota is a sanctuary state for so-called transgender children. Right? Parents are the problem, and the state knows better than the parents. Okay, then there's the other side of the coin, the institutions that deserve to be wrecked, but which Kamala Harris would totally preserve. Let's start with the universities. Okay, the universities are the biggest scam in American life. The biggest, bar none. Liberal arts studies have become indoctrination centers for the left. Colleges are there now to teach students to protest their civilization, become good little left-wing apparatchik activists. That's what they are, rather than to be good citizens. The left encourages this. They want it. It is not a coincidence.
Hold on. So learning your history and learning about the social structures, racial structures, even economic structures and governmental structures, that's woke, apparently. And that's not being a good American citizen. Or is being a good American citizen being indoctrinated by way of listening to everything that you tell us, Ben, and and instead of us learning from an education system about the reality of what happened in our country. We're just not supposed to. So it's bad for us to learn that. We're being bad Americans by learning things instead of just like listening to what you tell us on your show. Got it.
That Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer was recently caught on email telling the president of Columbia University to ignore Jew hatred on campus, since he said only Republicans were upset. The universities are the corrupt preserve of the radical left. They're the breeding.
Okay, I don't agree with that. That's ridiculous if that happened. Oh, look, I have a brain. I can say that I don't agree with something that's on my apparent side, that being the left.
Ground for Democratic donors and leaders. They are the engine of wokeness. They ought to be torn down as they currently stand. I'm not talking about the STEM program at MIT. I'm talking about the liberal arts aspects of these universities that are there only to churn out good little left-wing activists. Kamala Harris wouldn't just preserve these universities. She would strengthen them infinitely by giving them billions of dollars in student loan bailout money. Donald Trump would not. Then, of course, there is the legacy media. Now, as I've said before, the legacy media are the tail end of the Democrat media human centipede. They ingest whatever Democrats tell them, and then they excrete the digested product onto the American people. That's how the media spent, for example, 2 years telling us that Joe Biden was mentally competent. If you didn't believe it, you were engaging in cheap fakes, only to flip when they got embarrassed and he died on stage with Donald Trump. And then they told us he had to go for 2 weeks. And then as soon as Kamala Harris was put back in place, they went right back to ignoring the fact that our president is non-compos mentis so as to preserve him in the presidency. There's not a day that goes by in which the legacy media don't prove that they are stenographers for Democrats. Now, the entire lie that was told the end of last week that Donald Trump wanted Liz Cheney executed was trotted out there by the entire legacy media, and it was a lie because, again, the media work, effectively speaking, for the Democrats. The same simply isn't true for Republicans. When Republicans are in power, the legacy media actually try to hold them to account, and they treat them as the enemy. The legacy media will, by the way, be wrecked by the free market. That's happening. Trust in legacy media is at all-time lows. But it will not happen if Kamala Harris and her friends work to enshrine the legacy media's monopolistic dominance by cracking down on the social media platforms that allow alternative media to thrive. That's precisely what they plan to do. The goal for the left is to pressure social media to remove alternatives so you are just stuck permanently with the legacy media in control. Right? That is the goal. Okay, so I've made the case here for Donald Trump and against Kamala Harris. There are good reasons to vote for Trump other than disliking Harris. I've made that clear. I gave you independent reasons why I would vote for Trump, even against another Democrat. But here is the funny thing about this particular election. Almost no one thinks the opposite. Most Democrats believe that voting for Kamala is worthwhile, not because they can actually make an affirmative case for Kamala Harris. That case is not makeable. She's awful. They can only make a case against Trump.
That's not true. I can make a case right now. So obviously, number one, I can make a case against Trump. And maybe you guys will just call me super far left. So obviously, okay, yeah, I make a case against Trump. He's a fascist. Done. Case for Kamala Harris. Let's see. She has very progressive mindset. By the way, most of the country is progressive. For example, she has Tim Walz, who did paid family leave. That polls at 84% amongst Americans. Very progressive. She has Tim Walz. I'm hoping that maybe Tim Walz can influence her in that direction, because that's a very good thing for people. It helps people out. Who doesn't want to go spend time with their children when they go home? Let's see. She wants to do tax breaks for new babies coming for the first year of their life. She wants to extend the child tax credit. She wants to create more homes across the country when we're in a housing crisis. I know we're looking for housing right now, so I know exactly what that looks like, right? She wants to also give first-time home buyers what I think it was $25,000 in tax breaks or something along those lines. I have to look at her platform again. But I'm sorry. Are these not things that people want? Is this not something I can make a case for? Oh, she wants to stop price gouging, like with the like what the giant corporations were doing when they made record profits over 2022 and 2023. I'm sorry, am I not making a case for her? I'm sorry, is she also just a sane individual who actually has qualifications unlike Donald Trump? Is that not a case for her? Yeah, please miss me with that.
And that should worry you. See, here's the thing. The case against Trump is speculative. Back before Donald Trump was ever president, I might even have agreed with that case. As I've said already, I didn't vote for either candidate in 2016 because the case for both was speculative. But then here's the funny thing that happened. Donald Trump was the president. And so I know what his presidency will be. A solid economy, an excellent foreign policy, a fight against woke ideology that endangers our future. And I know what Kamala Harris will be too. That's not speculative either. She is not some sort of cipher who emerged from the clouds. She's the sitting vice president of the United States, and she cannot name a single way she disagrees with Joe Biden. Not one. Joe Biden was a tool of the woke.
Let's be very, very, very clear. It's just politics. You cannot say anything negative about the current sitting president when that is your president and you're the vice president. Of course she wouldn't say that, Ben, but you know that. Obviously she's doing different things. She already said that she would do different things, okay? And you guys are playing that clip from the very first interview she did right after she got not voted. Want to be very fair about that too. After she got appointed to the position, which I don't fully agree with, but given the time frame and the situation, I understand. Anyways, after she got put into that position, you're going off of that one clip that somebody asked her for the first time, right? Of course she's going to be rocky. She just got hoisted into the position. Since then, she's created several policy plans that differ from Joe Biden's. So what are you talking about? You're lying.
Woke left. He presided over economic stagnation, foreign policy collapse, the continued fraying of our social compact. She would do precisely the same thing. And that's why you should ignore all the alarmists. If you're on the fence, you should ignore all the alarmism on all sides. There's no mystery to this election. We know what Trump 2 would look like. Trump 1. And we know what Kamala Harris would look like. Biden 2. That's the call. That's the whole thing. Ain't no more. That's the whole thing. So here's the thing. Again, you don't have to love Donald Trump. You don't even have to like Donald Trump. You don't have to like what he says. You don't have to like the Truth Social. You don't have to like all the weird stuff that he does. But you do need someone to fix the problems that plague the country, not make them worse, not exacerbate them, not set the country on fire. The person who's going to fix those problems is Donald Trump. That's why on Friday, I voted for him. All right, folks, in a second, we'll get to the actual news of the day, the closing stretcher. I've done shows from all kinds of offices over the years. Radio studios, university lecture halls, conference centers, the list goes on and on. Here is the thing. While there are many different types of offices out there, one thing is for certain. Choosing the right candidate for any office, gigantic responsibility. If you're hiring and you want to find the best candidates for your office, you need ZipRecruiter. Right now, you can try it for free at ZipRecruiter.com/dailywire. ZipRecruiter way to hire. Also, let's talk about something that affects or visit Kamala Harris. It was about not Joe Biden. Fetch. She is so brat. I'm still feeling the joy. Listen, you know what that joy was? That joy was the glee that you got away with murdering the current president of the United States politically. That is the joy that you felt. That moment of just ecstasy that you felt when you realized that Joe Biden was not going to be the nominee. It was not about Kamala Harris. It was about not Joe Biden. That's what that was. But she's still trying to do it. She's still trying to make.
So I think for most people, it did start off about with being not Joe Biden. I agree to some extent. I think we were just happy that, oh my gosh, we don't have this guy who's like shriveling up and needs to go sit down somewhere and hang out with his grandchildren. Of course. But then after she started the campaign, everybody got incredibly hype. You can see it at the rallies. You can see it at her rallies versus Trump's rallies. It's evident. It's very, very evident. People are excited to go to the polls. I talk to people on a regular basis here in Fulton County. Okay, to say that people are just happy that it's that sure, that was day 1, day 2, 3, and the following weeks, not the case.
Fetch happened. So on Saturday night, she did a surprise cold open in violation of FCC regulations, actually, on Saturday Night Live, and it was predictably not good at all. So here she was doing the routine on Saturday night. She is so bad. God, she's bad at this. She's so bad at this.
You're laughing like she was so bad at it. Everybody loved it, Ben. Everybody loved it. It's just you. It's just you and your bias, man. You and your Republican cronies bias, yeah.
Wow, well, this is it. The last campaign stop in Pennsylvania. Gosh, I wish I could talk to someone who's been in my shoes, you know, a black South Asian woman running for president, preferably from the Bay Area.
Oh my God, she's awful. Oh, she's so terrible. Can you imagine these tackles for like 4 years? Can you imagine it? Maya Rudolph is less insufferable. Wow. They're still laughing. Still grinning crazily. Boy, is she...
I'm sorry. Why is that crazy grinning when she's smiling while she's waiting for the crowd to stop cheering. And by the way, the crowd is cheering like that because they're happy to see her, Ben. Like you're so pathetic, dude.
She's so awkward. She's just awkwardness embodied in a human being. Goodness gracious.
You and me both, sister. It is nice to see you, Kamala. It is nice to see you, Kamala. And I'm just here to remind you, you got this. Because you can do something your opponent cannot do. You can open doors.
Wow, this is hilarious. This is hilarious stuff. Top notch comedy writing.
I see what you did there, like to a garbage truck, right? I don't really laugh like that, do I?
Yeah, it's much worse.
A little bit. Now, Kamala, take my Pamela.
Oh, they're going to do rhymes.
The American people want to stop the chaos and end the drama.
Rhymes, wow.
With a cool new stepmamala. Kick back in our pajamas and watch a rom Kamala. Like Legally Blondula. And start decorating for Christmas. Fa la 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 la. Because what do we always say? Keep Kamala and carry on a la.
Oh, no. Oh, so many awkward vibes. Ooh. I can't take it anymore. I can't. No more. Let's make it stop. Make it stop. I think a lot of Americans are going to think that, when they get into the actual voting, but they're going to make it stop. Just make it stop. Whatever you do, make it stop.
Sir, you're so wrong. And I can't wait to watch your videos after she decimates Trump, dude, because you are just, that was funny. That was funny and clean. They even did a little bit of self-deprecation. Like, what's wrong with that, Ben? Like, come on, man.
Please. It actually has vibes of 2016. So I don't know if you recall this, but back in 2016, there was a full-scale SNL tribute to Hillary Clinton right before the election. In retrospect, one of the most hilarious things that ever happened at the time, it was insufferable. Now it's hilarious. Just like that tweet where she said, "Happy birthday to this future president." Here, you'll recall, it was Kate McKinnon as Hillary Clinton singing Hallelujah. There's nothing funny about it, except that now, in retrospect, since she lost to Donald Trump, it's one of the funniest things that ever happened in the history of Earth.
I heard there was a secret chord that David played and it pleased the Lord, but you don't really care for music, do you?
Okay, so I'm gonna skip past this for personal reasons. Also, I don't like Hillary. Let's just go up to, we'll go to this Trump thing.
Hello to our great sports fans, and I hope you're having a fantastic time. We're 2 days away from the most important election in the history of our country. We've got to save our country, and it needs saving. It's in very bad shape. The worst economic numbers in generations were just announced 2 days ago. We're losing jobs. We're losing everything, including viability. We're going to end up in a depression based on what's been happening. We've never seen anything like it, at least for the last 40 years. We have to straighten out our country. We have to close our borders. We have to lower our taxes. We have to get rid of inflation, and we're going to do it. Just remember, Kamala and her friends broke it. I'll fix it. Most important election in the history of our country. Go and vote.
I'll do a much better job. That is the essence of the Donald Trump argument, and it's a pretty good argument. But here's the thing. Her closing argument is, number one, that she is incredibly brat, so brat, unbelievably brat, right? That's why she trotted out, for example, Cardi B to do an endorsement. So, whatever you do, don't go on Twitter and try to find the video of her talking about particular techniques, shall we say. Let's just say that Cardi B is the least appropriate person to ever do a presidential endorsement, and it ain't particularly close. She actually had an awkward moment where her teleprompter went out. Cardi B without this teleprompter, man, she is just lost. She is gone. And so she stood there for fully 1 minute saying nothing before somebody realized they had to bring her a thing to try to read from. Because again, I don't think she reads very well either. Here was Cardi B's endorsement. Again, this is so brat. It's so hot. It's so joy. Or alternatively, it's so forced.
I'm not giving Donald Trump a second chance. Nope. I'm not taking any chances with my future, and I damn sure and taking no chances with the future of my children. All three of them. All three of them. I'm not giving him the chance. You're not giving him the chance. Yeah.
Oh, boy. Oh, boy.
I'm with Kamala. I believe in her.
A closer from the woman most famous
In America,
for performing.
I believe in you to turn out on Tuesday.
I can't.
Turn out and turn
They're
up
so
on
insufferable.
Tuesday.
You want this? You really
Turn
want
the
this?
page and let's win this thing.
Oh, good. So the lady who is most famous for performing particularly sexual acts with Megan Thee Stallion live on stage at the Video Music Awards. That one. But don't worry, it's not just her. Apparently, Kamala Harris will be joined by an array of superstars on Monday evening at her final rallies in Philadelphia and Pittsburgh. Katy Perry, who has outlived her usefulness. Katy Perry is aging like Joe Biden. Andra Day and D Nice, I didn't even know those were humans, are performing at her rally in Pittsburgh. I'm sure that D Nice, that was his given name, or her name. I don't know who that is. In Philadelphia, the campaign said there will be performances or remarks. I love that. Performances or remarks. They're just going to fool you again. They're gonna, by Lady Gaga. So Lady Gaga is not going to perform. Lady Gaga, we're going to bring forth musicians to say things, which is the last thing you want from musicians. You don't want them talking, you want them singing. They already did this with Beyonce. So you're going to get Lady Gaga, Fat Joe, as opposed to his brother Skinny Joe, Ricky Martin, who was last relevant in 1998, The Roots, Freeway, Just Blaze, DJ Jazzy Jeff, DJ Cassidy, Jasmine Sullivan, and Adam Blackstone. I must be old. I have no idea who any of those people are, but that's definitely going to move the woke young vote in Philadelphia and Pittsburgh. Right? This is where she is. Okay, so again, fake closer number one. She's brat. She's joy. She's got it going on. Okay, and then there's fake closer number two. She is all about togetherness. Do you understand? Togetherness. You will have unity and you will love it. Now, I might have believed this in 2020 if I was a fool. When Joe Biden said it, you remember Joe Biden tried to run the same campaign. He was going to bring us all together, Emily. That's what Mike said, together. That's like unity. And then 5 minutes later, he's like, anybody who's super, ultra, super duper, pooper, scooper, MAGA is a traitor. Firing squad, launched into garbage. It's like, oh, that's what you meant by unity. What you meant by unity is we should all just do what you want us to do. Well, Kamala Harris's closing ad is that she wants us to get together. She wants us to get together like Haley Mills in The Parent Trap. Here we go.
Hannah. Come here, Hannah. Shake my hand. How you doing? Good.
And bring everybody back together.
And that's exactly how I feel.
That's what I'm doing, man.
Okay, you have to stay in touch with me, okay? I'm very serious about that.
Love to.
Okay. Throughout this campaign, I've seen the best of America, and I've seen what is holding you back and weighing you down. High costs, fundamental rights taken away, and politics that have driven fear and division. You deserve better. As president, I'll bring a new generation of leadership. I'll take on price gouging and bring down the cost of groceries and housing and prescriptions. I'll fight for your freedom to make your own choices, and I will protect your health care and your benefits, not take them away.
Trump isn't touching any of
The
that stuff.
vast majority of people in our country have so much more in common than what separates them. Good people, hardworking people. We see in our fellow Americans neighbors.
Hey, look, a small town and American flags. She's running as a Republican now. This is exciting.
We believe in each other.
There we go, American flags.
We
Cops.
believe in our
Didn't
country. We're not falling for these
Prayer.
folks who are trying
That's
to
a big one for
divide
her.
us.
Okay, I can't.
Together.
Again, when I keep saying I can't about Kamala, there is no way to believe her because she's a liar. She's like, go check out our 4-part series, Scamala, if you don't believe it. She is a liar. I love it. She's campaigning now on cops and the American flag. She literally said we shouldn't say Merry Christmas to people because of all the suffering to the underprivileged in the United States, to illegal immigrant populations. This is a person who contributed to a bail fund for rioters in Minneapolis. And she's out there with ads with cops in them. Just ridiculous. Okay, so what is her actual closer? What is her actual closer in the end? Her actual closer, as you always knew it was, is that Donald Trump is a grave threat. That he is, in fact, wait for it, a Nazi. Yes, that's the closer. The closer is that he's a Nazi. We'll get to that momentarily. First, folks, let's talk about something the radical left does not want you to think about this Thanksgiving, where your meat actually comes from. While they're busy promoting their plant-based agenda, most grocery stores are quietly filling their shelves with imported meat. from who knows where. Here is the thing. When you're gathering around the table with your family this Thanksgiving, shouldn't you know exactly where your food comes from? That's why I trust Good Ranchers. They partner exclusively with American farmers and ranchers to deliver 100% American meat directly to your door. Unlike the mystery meat at your local grocery store, Good Ranchers products have no antibiotics, no hormones. They don't have seed oils. It's local, which means you can trust the American process. We are talking genuine steakhouse quality. You know, Good Ranchers made me a kosher steak one time. Oh boy, that was really good. Right now, Good Ranchers is making an incredible offer. Subscribe to any Good Ranchers box. They'll add a free Thanksgiving ham to your first delivery. That is a $110 value, completely free. And yes, that includes free express shipping. Head on over to goodranchers.com right now. Use code BEN to claim your free Thanksgiving ham before they run out. Remember, this is about more than just getting amazing meat. It's about supporting American farmers and ranchers with every order. That's goodranchers.com, code BEN. Good Ranchers is indeed American meat delivered. Goodranchers.com, code BEN. Also, ladies and gents, we brought it back one last time, as we've told you. It's the most crucial moment yet. Right now, you get 47% off your new Daily Wire Plus annual membership with code FIGHT at dailywire.com/subscribe. Because no matter what happens on Tuesday, the fight goes on. And number 47, it's not a coincidence, as Donald Trump fights his way back to the White House, we're on the front lines challenging the left and the legacy media's rhetoric, lies, and deceptive agenda, and making sure your voice is heard. There's no shortage of media covering the election tomorrow night, but we know where you want to hang out. You want to hang out with us at the Daily Wire. It's the only place you'll get the facts from the most trusted voices in conservative media. The entire gang will be here. You know, me and Jeremy and Michael and Andrew and Matt, along with special guests like Dr. Jordan B. Peterson, Dennis Prager, Spencer Clavin, and more live. Anything could happen. We're covering it all as it unfolds for the next 27 years. Do not miss a moment. Go to dailywire.com/subscribe. Use code FIGHT for 47% off your new Daily Wire Plus membership. Okay, so Kamala Harris's actual closer, what is it? You know what it is. You know what it is. He's a Nazi. He's a Nazi. Okay, now here's the thing, as I said at the very open. No, he isn't. You know how I know? Not only because I know Donald Trump, not only because, you know, I commemorated October 7th with Donald Trump, not only because you know what Nazis don't tend to get? The support of Hasidic communities in New Jersey. There's a tape going around right now of buses playing in Yiddish a call for Jews to get out and vote for Donald Trump by name. That's happening in like Williamsburg, New Jersey. That's something that typically Nazis don't receive. Also, the Nazis in this election, they seem not to like him very much because they think he's too philo-Semitic. But that's their case anyway. So Tim Walz, the weirdest man ever to run for vice president. And that's saying a lot because Spiro Agnew was once the vice president of the United States. Here was Tim Walz saying, you'll be asked at what you did to stop Trump. One day from our concentration camps, you'll be asked, did you do enough to stop Trump? And you'll say, no, son. Here's Tim Walz, goofball.
Trust me, there'll come a day. Someday you're going to be sitting on that porch. You're going to be in that rocking chair. And a little one's going to come up to you after been in school where they've been studying the 2024 election. And they're going to ask, when everything was on the line and the American experiment was on the line, and there was somebody running who asked to be a dictator and to overturn the Constitution and talk about using the military against our own people, what did you do to stop that from happening? And you're going to be able to say every damn thing we could. Every damn thing.
He's authentic because he says damn sometimes, guys. Meanwhile, over at MSNBC, they're like, Trump is going to bring us back to Jim Crow. And then even worse, he's going to go back even worse. So Ayanna Pressley, who's the Ringo star of the Squad, you know, the member that nobody cares about or notices, but she's there. So she says that Trump is going to bring us back to Jim Crow. Now, here's the thing. I've heard this argument before because they said it about Mitt Romney and John McCain. And you know what happened? Donald Trump was already president. You know what didn't happen? Jim Crow. I still think it's hilarious that Democrats have been allowed to get away with the lie that Georgia's election law was Jim Crow 2.0. You want to talk about a lie, like a stupid lie? That is a stupid lie. The early voting for black voters in Georgia, very high. It turns out black voters have been able to come out to the polls very easily in Georgia. Doesn't matter. They can lie as much as they want. They're Democrats. Here's Ayanna Pressley.
Donald Trump and J.D. Vance, they mean to take us back to Jim Crow and then some. They want to control our wombs. They want to control the classrooms. They want to control our bedrooms. They mean to control every aspect of our lives. They mean harm to every person that calls this country home.
They mean harm to everyone who calls the country home. Everyone. They're going to come into your bed. Wow. Wow, that's probably true. Or alternatively, these people are totally crazy. Meanwhile, Democrats are still trying to appeal to male voters because there is a gender gap for the Democrats, a very wide gender gap. And so they have deployed uber male Doug Emhoff. Yes, everyone's favorite, Doug Emhoff. Yay. Remember that guy? He pretends to be both a man and a Jew. Anyway, Doug Emhoff, here he is explaining that he knows young men who are voting for Kamala. Not many, for sure, but all it took was them getting off of the UFC and podcasts. By the way, you can see why they're trying to crack down on podcasts, can't you? Here is Doug Emhoff, fresh off of allegedly beating up his ex-girlfriend years ago. Anyway, here we go.
What I talk to young men about who might be taken by the, fun side of Donald Trump, such as it is, the dancing, the going to the wrestling matches, going on the podcasts, and trying to portray himself as someone who he really is. And I think Cardi B called this out and said it's just all a hustle. Mm-hmm. And so what I'm trying to implore young men in particular to do the research. He's not your friend. The policies that he's talking about will not help them in the economy.
That's my favorite thing. He's trying to appeal to young men. He's like, let me quote a famous person who young men particularly are fond of. Cardi B. Nailed it. Meanwhile, Democrats are rolling out a new ad to seek mail voters. It is amazing how in this election cycle, they must believe they're losing, because in this election cycle, they've rolled out two ads, one to women, one to men. Both basically say the same thing. You have to secretly vote for Kamala. Because apparently, the handmaid's tale will be visited upon you if you openly vote for Kamala. It's just ridiculous. Here we go.
Come on, boys. Let's make America great again. It's your turn, buddy.
Before you cast your vote in this election, think about how it'll impact the people you care about the most.
Daddy!
Remember, you can vote any way you want, and no one will ever know.
Do your patriotic duty?
You bet I did, brother. What happens in the booth stays in the booth.
He's voting so one day that little girl can abort his grandbabies. Apparently, that's the message of that campaign. I do love this, that apparently the Kamala Harris campaign thinks that you are being intimidated into voting for Donald Trump. That's the only reason. You have to secretly vote for Kamala Harris. Okay, all right. Now, here's the thing. They've declared that Donald Trump is a threat to the institutions, that Donald Trump is so thoroughgoing and evil that he has to be stopped no matter what, which is strange because they just keep making anti-American arguments. So Mehdi Hasan, who is one of the worst voices in American politics, he shouldn't really be considered part of American politics. Depends who you consider his paymasters from long ago. In any case, former Al Jazeera employee who spends every waking moment finding excuses for terrorism is no matter who wins or loses on Tuesday, I will never not stop being mad at Joe Biden and Merrick Garland for allowing Trump to face the electorate this week without having seen the inside of a courtroom for his crimes on and ahead of January 6th. Astonishing incompetence, caution, cowardice, and more from the top of the Democratic Party. They'll say it was to try and retain faith in an impartial DOJ. But even after giving Trump a pass, the Dems and the Biden DOJ are still accused of carrying out a witch hunt against Trump and of weaponizing the justice system against him. So what was gained? Yeah, just to get this straight, Mehdi Hasan is saying that what should have happened is that Donald Trump was imprisoned. Right? These are the people who are upholding democracy in your institutions. Mehdi Hasan. Meanwhile, Governor Kathy Hochul, she's taking a note from the book of Andrew Cuomo, former governor, who at one point said that Republicans should basically just leave the state. Now, here she is saying the same thing. She says, if you vote Trump, that makes you anti-American, says Governor Kathy Hochul.
It gives me, as someone who is leading the effort in our state, to ensure we flip these battleground seats. It gave me a chance to tie the Republicans running these seats, the incumbents, closer to Donald Trump, and remind everybody, if you're voting for these Republicans in New York, you are voting for someone who supports Donald Trump, and you're anti-woman, you're anti-abortion, and basically you're anti-American because you have just trashed American values and what our country is all about over and over and over, and you will wear this on Election Day.
Guys, you're not just garbage, you're anti-American garbage, according to Kathy Hochul. Man, but don't worry, they're going to come together. Unity. That's what they're looking for. Meanwhile, Jamie Raskin, who actually objected to the Electoral College vote in 2016, he now says that maybe they'll uphold the peaceful transfer path. This has been a big question for Democrats. If Donald Trump truly is a Nazi, don't you have a responsibility to thwart his election, even if he wins? Here's Jamie Raskin kind of letting the cat out of the bag. Is, well, maybe we'll challenge it.
So when I say we will support a free and fair election, no, we're not going to allow them to steal it in the states or steal it at the Department of Justice or steal it with any other election official in the country. If it's a free and fair election, we will do what we've always done. We will honor it.
Okay. If it's a free and fair election. I'm noticing conditionals there, Jamie. Interesting how that works. Okay, meanwhile, Donald Trump is making his closing pitch. His closing pitch is, him riffing off the cuff. And they're mad at him again. Because, he's using violent language. He made a joke about people shooting at him because he's in a bulletproof case outside because they've tried to assassinate him twice over the course of this. He's been 2 assassination attempts in one election cycle. Is a lot, actually. And he made a joke about shooting through the media and him not minding it or whatever. And this apparently is yet another example of Donald Trump being a very mean, bad orange, bad, mean Hitler man.
I have a piece of glass over here, and I don't have a piece of glass there. And I have this piece of glass here, but all we have really over here is the fake news, right? And to get me, somebody would have to shoot through the fake news. And I don't mind that so much, because I don't mind.
Hey, not my favorite Donald Trump joke. Also, does anyone think that Trump is calling for the execution of members of the media? That's what they're going with. Meanwhile, Joe Biden is out there still saying that he wants to, for some reason, smack Trump's guys in the ass, which I don't know what's happening here. I don't know what happened to that YMCA with Corn Pop or whatever, but this guy is still president. Remember that time that this guy's still president? Like how he's still president and we're supposed to ignore it because he doesn't have a brain anymore? How it turns into a fudgesicle? All right, here we go.
But I'm serious. These are the kind of guys you like to smack in the ass.
Yeah, smack him in the... That's weird, Joe. That's just super duper weird. Now, the real closing pitch, of course, from the Donald Trump campaign is what you saw in that ad earlier, which is that Kamala Harris has presided over a terrible economy, that their foreign policy is really bad. But there is one other aspect to the close of this campaign. We would not be able to move on to the member block of today's show without first mentioning Peanut the Squirrel. Peanut the Squirrel, my goodness. So, campaigning in Sanford, North Carolina on Sunday, J.D. Vance said that Donald Trump was fired up about the squirrel's death. That's what he said. He was fired up about the squirrel's death. He said, quote, "The same government that doesn't care about hundreds of thousands of illegal immigrant criminals coming into our country doesn't want us to have pets. It's the craziest thing." So what is the story with Peanut the Squirrel? The much celebrated Peanut the Squirrel who has launched 1,000 memes. I know that all these campaigns have become a little too online is my take on this. The vast majority of Americans don't know or care about Peanut the Squirrel, but here's the actual story. It is a good example of just government insane overreach. So, according to the New York Post, Peanut the Squirrel of internet fame has been euthanized after the pet was seized by New York State earlier this week, according to the Department of Environmental Conservation. The 7-year-old gray rescue squirrel, commonly referred to as Peanut on Instagram, Facebook, and TikTok, was put to death, along with Fred the raccoon. Man, stand strong with Harambe, guys. Said animals could be tested for rabies, according to a statement from the agency. Peanut's guardian, Mark Longo, took to Instagram to memorialize his beloved pet in a video. Here's the owner of Peanut speaking about this terrible, terrible tragedy.
It not only tears my family apart, but Peanut was the cornerstone of our nonprofit animal rescue. And 10 to 12 DEC officers raided my house as if I was a drug dealer. I was sat outside my house for 5 hours. I had to get a police escort to my bathroom. I wasn't even allowed to feed my rescue horses breakfast or lunch. I was sat there like a criminal after they interrogated my wife to check out her immigration status, then proceeded to ask me if I had cameras in my house, then proceeded to go through every cabinet, nook, and cranny of my house for a squirrel and a raccoon. 4 departments and a judge signed off on a search warrant for a squirrel and a raccoon. And then they took them and killed them. We had him for 7.5 years. He became the world's most famous squirrel. We weren't hiding him by any means. He was all over TikTok. He became the first squirrel on TikTok to ever hit 1 million followers. He did every news station around the world. He's helped people. He's helped kids gather joy. And then we started a nonprofit animal rescue called Peanut's Freedom Farm to help animals like Peanut fight a good fight when they're in a neglected case or they're sitting in a slaughter auction. And he was the cornerstone of our life and our organization.
Okay, so then they came and they murdered Peanut. He had secret information about Hillary Clinton, apparently. So what actually happened here? Apparently, the DEC claimed that Peanut, who was notably docile and friendly over the course of his very public-facing life, bit one of the investigators on the hand while being confiscated from his Elmira home on Wednesday. So why? Well, what actually happened, apparently, is some of the nosy neighbors, were upset with Peanut and Fred the raccoon. There were multiple anonymous complaints about wild animals living in the Longo house. So they showed up en masse to the house and they took away Peanut and Fred, and Peanut and Fred were summarily executed, which, again, I got to say, like, the fact that these are national stories is kind of wild, but it does speak to the power of government overreach. And Peanut will live forever in our hearts. I didn't know about him until a moment ago, but I suppose he will for some. And again, like, it is insane that the government, they'll let in, like 10 million illegal immigrants over the course of the Biden administration and do nothing about it. Like, we don't have the resources for that. 10 to 12 officers need to remove a squirrel and a raccoon and put them to death. I feel like we have some misallocation of priorities and resources here in our United States. Alrighty, folks. So coming up on the member block, we'll get into what's at stake in the United States Senate. You don't want to go check that out over at dailywire.com/subscribe. Remember, get 47% off your annual subscription. If you're not a member, become a member. Use code Shapiro. Check out for 2 months free on all annual plans. Click that link in the description and join us.
That message, just in contrast to everything that Donald Trump puts out into the meat space of like the actual news, it just doesn't work. It's all been so self-inflicted. Like the obsessions about 2020, we just mentioned the abortion stuff, the shooting of the press, like all of this stuff. It's such a contrast to 2016, where he really did let the more effective part of his message, draining the swamp, American carnage, blah, 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 like that. He let that lead in the end.
Hello, Michigan State! It is good to be in the house of my dear friend Magic Johnson. Go green! All right. East Lansing, are we ready to do this? Are we ready to vote? Are we ready to win?
Hello and welcome to the Bulwark Podcast. I'm your host, Tim Miller. That was Vice President Kamala Harris at her final rally in Michigan on Sunday evening, East Lansing, home of the Spartans. And she is a barn burner of a schedule over the next 48 hours, hitting every swing state. And I'm here today with Bill Kristol, of course, because it's Monday. How you doing, Bill?
Fine, Tim. How are you?
The vice president is has made a little change to the stump speech for the close. She's not mentioning Donald Trump anymore. What do you make about that, if anything?
I think that's wise. I think by now everyone knows what the alternative is, and Trump has spoken for himself over this last week quite well enough, I think, from Kamala Harris's point of view.
He has indeed. We're going to have much more to talk about that. But first, let's, it's if there's a day to do horse race, it's the day before the election. And so I think we might as well do some horse race. Yesterday, I had to do the emergency bonus pod with Queen Ann Seltzer, the outlier queen from Iowa, who once again kind of rattled the cage of the political world with a poll result that was out of step with what the trend had been. The last two presidential times, she had done that in ways that made things look better for Trump. This time the inverse. Wondering what you made of that and just kind of the broader, what you're kind of seeing out there. Obviously, there are other polls, New York Times, Siena, NBC. There's been other polls over the weekend as well.
So on Ann Seltzer, she's polled Iowa many times. She's been quite accurate. The last two times she was right on the money with Trump's margin, I think 7 and 8 points, right, in 2016 and 2020. I remember so vividly that Saturday night in 2016, right before the election day, everyone thought Hillary was going to win. I was actually nervous because of Comey, and just it seemed like it was tightening some, and so I kind of thought there was a chance Trump would win, but I still thought Hillary would win. And I remember seeing that poll. I think she always drops it at 7 p.m. Eastern time, isn't that right, on Saturday night? Mm-hmm. And talking to two friends, I still had Republican friends at this point. These were two Republican members of Congress from the Midwest, one a senator, one a House member, and both of them said, "Oh my God, if I was really +7, I think that's what she found in 2016, yeah. +8 or +7, I can't remember, for Trump." Wisconsin and Michigan are not easy for Hillary. I mean, they're not going to be 7. They're not going to be 8 points to the right, to the left of Iowa. They could be 5 points to the left of Iowa, and they were actually. And Hillary lost them by 1 and 2 points. And so I think, and then in 2020, when Biden was up by 8, 9, 10 points in a lot of the national polls, she showed again a Trump +8, which I think was exactly what happened, which suggested that the erosion was not nearly as bad from 2016, unfortunately, for Trump. Luckily, it was enough for him to lose. So she's been right the last 2 times. She polls in a more traditional way. She doesn't do a lot of waiting. She doesn't assume, doesn't look back at the vote for 2020. She asks people who they're for. Are they going to vote, and who are they for? Now, Iowa, they have better response rates. It's such a nice state where they answer the phone and everything that maybe you can do it.
Brand, I think, also helps. You're calling from the Iowa poll in a time of losing trust. I think, and especially a time where she's been kind of favorable to Trump and Republicans. She mentioned on the pod yesterday, which I'd forgotten, that she was also counter conventional wisdom on the Braley-Ernst race in 2014 in favor of Ernst, more so than the other pollsters. And so, maybe there's like a trust building there and older population. There are a bunch of reasons where you could understand why maybe Iowa polling would have fewer problems than we see some other.
Yeah, or that you couldn't quite do what she's trying to do nationally. So to be fair to the other pollsters, it's not so obvious you could pull off what she pulls off in Iowa. But she has been accurate. I don't know. Everyone sort of immediately says, well, of course, Trump's not going to actually lose the state by 3. I mean, maybe he'll just win it by 2 or 3, but even that would be a move from the 7 or 8 he had the last 2 times.
That's a ball game.
And that would be a ball game if everything else moved accordingly. Now, there are a couple of things one should say. I'm not so sure Trump will. I mean, why can't you just be right? Maybe Trump will lose the state by 3. I mean, people are being a little too quick to say, I don't know, she's the best pollster in Iowa. She has a +3 Harris, she's the latest pollster. Then a couple other people hurried into the field to try to correct it and to herd back to +7 or something, but I don't really trust those polls. Secondly, the interesting question is, obviously there's some spillover from Iowa to other states. If Iowa's going to be +3 Harris is going to win Wisconsin and Michigan. On the other hand, Iowa has had, it's been slightly different. I mean, the abortion issue has been really hot and central in Iowa, right? They passed a very strict law. Given that Iowa's not, Mississippi or Alabama, it seems particularly strict compared to some of its neighbors.
6 weeks.
6 weeks, with very few exceptions, if I recall. It was much debated when it went into effect. I believe it's been a big issue at the state level in some of the races this November and in some of the congressional races, but a lot of advertising about it. It's front and center in people's minds. If it's less front and center in other people's minds in other states, if you already have a Democratic governor, you're not too worried perhaps about abortion rights. Arguably, it's a little less salient. So you can't just mechanically assume that because Iowa is whatever it is, it's going to transfer 1-to-1, so to speak, to other states. On the other hand, just to finish that up, though, I generally think Dobbs has been underrated, and the abortion issue has probably been underrated this year, even in states where it's not sort of quite in people's face.
Yeah, I want to go a little deeper on the abortion thing, but just on the demographic part of it. Yeah, sure. Yeah, just because Iowa moves, let's say she's wrong in the margin of error, and that Trump actually wins Iowa by 3 or 4, right? Which is a 3 or 4 point move better than Biden. So that does not mean that states are uniformly going to move 3 or 4 points to the left. There are a couple of reasons it could be for that. One which you just mentioned, the salience of the abortion issue. Another reason could be that, the way to square the circle about why Iowa is moving in a way that doesn't feel in touch with the national electorate is just demographics. Iowa's super white. It's possible that Kamala Harris is doing better with white voters, particularly older white voters, and particularly older white women, which is what showed in the Seltzer poll, which ties the abortion point, and at the same time is losing a little altitude with Black and Hispanic men. We don't know this to be the truth, but there's some evidence of this in the polling, right? And so you're moving 3 points in an older white state. That would not necessarily translate to Texas or whatever. I had several texts about if this is Iowa, what's Texas? I'm like, well, the demographics of Iowa and Texas are very different. But the demographics of Iowa and Wisconsin are very the same. Okay, not exactly the same, but quite similar. And if you don't recall, Joe Biden won Wisconsin, Michigan, and Pennsylvania last time. So if she's moving the right direction in Iowa, even if it's not as much as Seltzer says, that augurs almost certainly well for Wisconsin. I mean, Seltzer would have to be way off for Wisconsin to be wrong, to be, you know, out of Harris's column. A little less in Michigan and Pennsylvania, right? Because they have some different elements there that we could talk about, but still quite a few similarities, you know. And so, like, all things considered, the thing that's so encouraging for me is kind of like she could be off by a lot and have it still be really good for Harris in the upper Midwest. And
there are other indications that are slightly in the same direction, I think. So I'd say in Texas, Texas, of course, had less of a margin for Biden than Iowa in 2020. I take the point that Texas wouldn't necessarily move as much as Iowa or maybe move at all. On the other hand, all red in several polls now has been within a couple of points of Cruz in Texas. Yeah. In Nebraska, which is not too far from Iowa, I think, from my East Coast provincial point of view, but I think they're so near each other.
That is correct. Actually, the key Nebraska House district, Nebraska 2, is Omaha, which the media market bleeds into Iowa, and Council Bluffs, Iowa gets Omaha ads. So,
and
they have been advertised too.
And the last poll there, I think, had Harris plus 10 or 12, which was more of a margin than Biden. And that Senate race has been surprisingly competitive. We'll see if Osborne, the independent, can really come that close or pull it off. But even so, and then Florida, where abortion has also been very much in the news. Scott has been in some independent polling only 2 or 3 points ahead. So I wonder if there is a little bit going on in the states, which would include Texas and Florida, where abortion has been front and center. The gender gap is massive in Seltzer's poll and Ann's poll in Iowa. I don't know if it can be as massive in other states, and there are other things going on in these other states, obviously. But I feel like it's not entirely. I mean, it's a little. It is different from the conventional polls, obviously, but there are indications that push a little bit in that direction in some of these other states. And finally, I think in Michigan, I just read. So Michigan has some Harris plus 1 poll. The Michigan, I think it's the Free Press polls too, does, you know, serious guy. He's done polling there forever. He did a bunch of polls this year. He didn't change his weighting from poll to poll, he said, because that would be kind of crazy. You can't change midstream. But he now thinks, looking at the early vote, that he has underweighted younger voters, minority voters, and women, just from looking at the people who are actually out there voting. Again, the early vote can be off. Maybe women are disproportionately voting early, et cetera. But again, if you have it, and people don't quite understand, if you have a systematic underweighting of 1 or 2 or 3 percentage points of big groups of the population that are skewing strongly in one direction, so you're underweighting. If you underweight a group that's voting 50-50, it doesn't matter much, right? But if you underweight a group that's voting 85-15 like blacks or 60-40 even like women, you could be off by 2 or 3 points in your final numbers. That seems to be what he's hinting, at least in a kind of good faith way, I think.
Yeah. Just a couple of nerdy points on this. I was going to save it to the end, but we're already in the muck now, so we'll get into the early vote nerdy stuff and the polling nerdy stuff. Like, so for people who don't understand, like, the simplest way to explain the weighting, right, is you can't just call 1,000 people, right, and just look at the numbers from the 1,000 you answer, particularly these days, because like all 1,000 will be people over 50, right? Like, it's very like just looking just at age, right. It's very challenging to get 18 to 30-year-olds on the phone, and so, you know, at minimum you have to weight by age. Also, there are racial, particularly in diverse states, which makes Ann Seltzer's job easier, right? Like, you can't do 1,000 poll and have 980 of them be white people in Georgia, right? Like, yeah. So there's some minimal weighting you have to do, and Seltzer does it based just on gender, like on age and on demographics, right? But what happened in 2016 was nobody was waiting for college education, and non-college people weren't answering the phones as much as college educated voters were. And that's what caused the Trump miss. In short, there are other things that happened, but like that's like the main thing that happened that caused the Trump miss, because Trump was doing way better among non-college. And so people, to try to fix that, started waiting to all this other stuff like college attainment. We mentioned with Ann Seltzer, like 2020 vote. And like the more stuff you wait to, the more you're guessing what the electorate's going to be rather than letting the electorate tell you what it's going to be.
Yeah, just
that's a
footnote on that. That's a very good explanation. Actually, you should really take that on the road. It was very clear. But also, Democrats seem to partly this relates to college education, seem to answer the phone or talk to pollsters a little more than Republicans. And that is so when if you call in, or if you know that your state's sort of 50-50 Republican Democrat, and suddenly you've got a 20-point gap in Democrats answering your phone, you've got a problem. Now, you could weight it back to 50-50, but do you weight it to exactly 50-50? You don't know if it's going to be 50-50. Maybe it's 48-52. So I agree, especially the judgments that are not judgments of age and gender, which are mostly baked in, though not entirely, because you don't know exactly what the age distribution of the vote will be or the gender distribution, but they're more solid, let's say. But when you start waiting to recall vote or to party ID, which a lot of people are doing, and it's to say they sort of have to almost. On the other hand, it's very unreliable, and I think that's why. And I think she does not do that, right? She only waits to objective factors, if I could put it that way.
Yeah, it was just she did. Yes, it was geography. She wants. It also Iowa makes it easy. It's only 4 congressional districts, and again, there's a lot of ways it makes it easier for her. But this is why it makes her more reliable. She waits to each of the 4 congressional districts because you want to make sure you're getting enough rural and et cetera. So. I guess my final caveat on this is when you do real statistics like Ann is doing, you have real outliers, right? Like that's the other thing about there's a reason why we don't have outliers on the other ones, because they're all weighting to the same, they're not really doing random sampling polling. They're doing modeling. And so you don't have outliers when you're modeling. Anyway, okay, that's enough nerd talk for today. The one more thing on the early vote, which was interesting to the Detroit pollster. Or what he said, because you are getting a cross current of indicators. So if you're just obsessively refreshing X right now and you follow a bunch of election nerds, you'll see Republican election nerds being like, the rural turnout is huge and that's great for us, and the black turnout in the city is down a little bit, and that's what they're hanging their hat on, and that's true. And that's something that's a little concerning, and it's going to be the job of the Harris turnout operation today and tomorrow to balance that out. But then on the other side of the ticket, there's a 10% gender gap right now. 10%. Right. And so that, to me, that is the little stat that connects to Seltzer. I'm like, if that maintains, obviously that's good news for the vice president. So that ties into your abortion article from yesterday. So you mentioned that earlier, but you wrote over the weekend just about how, obviously it's not as if people haven't been talking about abortion, but looking back at the midterm, looking at what we've seen from early vote and Seltzer, like it just might be as simple as Roe.
Yeah, I'm looking at those referenda in red states where abortion rights were defended and abortion restrictions were defeated. That's pretty striking. Now, maybe it doesn't translate. I've been sort of uncertain that it would translate in a presidential election. If people think, especially if their rights are safe in their own states, that's where you get to the Wisconsin, Michigan, Pennsylvania, having Democratic governors kind of situation. Maybe they don't vote on it at the national level. On the other hand, Dobbs, Carville made this point to me in a conversation just a month ago. It's kind of simple, but as always with James, very perceptive. Dobbs is kind of a big deal. And I do feel like a certain number of our friends, maybe I'm a little guilty of this too, we want to analyze a million different things, Harris's campaign and Trump's campaign and the economy and immigration, and we're balancing all these issues. Dobbs is actually, immigration, fine. It's been an issue forever. Biden messed it up some, then he maybe corrected himself. You could argue about it forever, Haitians, and you can demagogue it. The economy's gotten a little better. Dobbs is just a big thing that happened in the last cycle, right? New news makes the most difference. What's new since the last cycle? January 6th. Some of us have been a little disappointed that hasn't made more of a difference against Trump. Maybe it still is a little bit. Ukraine, most people don't vote on that, I will stipulate, and Dobbs. Really, and so I feel maybe it just is big enough to move 3, 4, 5, 6 points. Maybe it'll make the whole difference really this time. People don't like quite acknowledging that for various reasons, both kind of good and bad, I would say. But yeah. It's a true thing that really happened, that has had real effects in real states that have been much publicized, and that you can plausibly argue that who you vote for president, but also for Senate and for governor, that it will affect policy in that area going forward, right? It has the elements of what makes an issue a voting issue, it seems to me.
Yeah. And just the one sentence I'd add to that is that Republicans have done an awful job at taking the air out of the issue.
Right.
Just awful, right? Honestly, going back to what was Lindsey Graham got much maligned for saying back when Dobbs first was overturned, that, like, maybe we should just have a national 20-week like standard and rules. And as it turns out, I probably would have hurt Republicans in the midterms because they would have done more poorly in the blue states where they picked up seats like New York and California. But for this presidential election, it might have helped somewhat because just like the draconian nature of the 6-week laws, the 5-week laws, these horrific stories that the campaign's been able to run on, and Trump and Vance's inability to have any coherent message about this, I think has also is also going to be something they're going to look back on with regret if they don't win tomorrow night. Trump is I wrote down the word unraveling. I hate that word because he's unraveled. There's no ravel to undo with him. But he doesn't. I wanted to play the vice president at the beginning because say what you want. But she has energy. She seems happy. She seems invigorated out there. And he is blustering and low energy and rambly. And there were a couple of lines from the weekend where he ended up venting some frustrations that I want to listen to. Let's first hear from Donald Trump talking about whether maybe the press might need to take some heat.
And I have this piece of glass here, but all we have really over here is the fake news, right? And to get me, somebody would have to shoot through the fake news. And I don't mind that so much, because I don't mind.
Remember the Liz Cheney discourse about how, he was just calling her a chicken hawk, or can we parse the language? Well, here he is again for the second time in the week fantasizing about having his enemies be shot.
Yeah, the violence is a feature, not a bug, right? Or the threat of violence, or the relishing of potential violence against enemies. Absolutely.
Yeah, and then we have this about his regrets about the end of his last term.
Our country the day that I left. I shouldn't have left. I mean, honestly, because we did so well. We had such a great. So now, I mean, every polling booth has hundreds of lawyers standing there. It's all about the lawyers. Everybody's standing lawyers. Nobody should have that.
A lot to unpack there. I shouldn't have left is a very specific way to put that. You know, I guess you could imagine, if you were being generous, Donald Trump saying something like, I should have been reelected, right? Like, we should have stuck the course. The Joe Biden has taken us off path. I shouldn't have left, though, is a pretty ominous way to put it.
Yeah, it strikes me also, don't you think it's the kind of thing you say when you don't think you're going to get back in, and you therefore shouldn't have left in the first place? I feel like there's a little bit of him sort of acknowledging that he doesn't think he's going to win tomorrow.
A little I try not to psychoanalyze him. I don't like being inside the brain. The other element of it, you have the lawyers, and I guess it's kind of like, does this even need to be said on this podcast? But it's like, the only reason there are lawyers everywhere is him. All of this is self-inflicted. I was watching, I was multitasking. I had football on in the background yesterday, and his, like, kind of the closing ad that they're running, like the 90-second ad about how Kamala broke it and Trump will fix it, ran. And it was just so striking to me listening to it. Actually, I want to play just like the last 20 seconds of it. Let's listen to that.
And we are going to launch a new golden age of American success for the citizens of every race, religion, color, and creed.
Remember, Kamala broke it. President Trump will fix it.
I'm Donald J. Trump, and I approve this message.
I was listening to this, and it's like that. It's almost a winning message. Like, if it wasn't Trump, right? Like, if the candidate was different, you could imagine a world where they're offering, look, we're gonna change the course. People are unhappy with inflation. People are unhappy with the border and the uncertainty around the world. And, we need to reinvigorate the country and we need to unite the country back together. But like that message, just in contrast to everything that Donald Trump puts out into the meat space of like the actual news, it just doesn't work. Like, it's all been so self-inflicted. Like the obsessions about 2020, we just mentioned the abortion stuff, the shooting of the press, like all of this stuff. It's such a contrast to 2016, where he really did like let the more effective part of his message, draining the swamp, American carnage, blah blah blah, like that. He let that lead in the end, and they were unable to do that this time.
And of course, Comey with Clinton led for those last 10 days. And Clinton was the story, not Trump, and he gained as a result. And I think that's even true in 2020. People think when they look back, I don't remember that quite as well because it's weird with the pandemic and stuff, but he managed to stay out of threatening violence, even more violence and so forth, or doing truly crazy things. Yeah, I mean, look, his paid campaign is always, I think, has been strong. I mean, and it shows you that a normal Republican, if Mitch McConnell had led the Senate to convict Trump in 2021, and if it's not 100% certain, but if that had been understood to preclude him from running again, and if he had accepted that preclusion, and if the Republican Party had accepted it, and if he'd
moved to Elba, and whatever, if he vanished and had his Twitter taken and had all communications devices taken away from him.
But if he were not the nominee, I guess is what I'm trying to say in a long-winded way. Yeah, the Republicans would probably be winning this race. Harris is not a very popular administration. There are plenty of things to complain about. The world is kind of chaotic, and the country and the economy is good, in fact, but inflation and so forth. So maybe they could have handled Dobbs, sort of as you were suggesting earlier, in a defter way. A regular candidate could have. Certainly, I think Nikki Haley could have. And I think that person would probably be ahead of Harris, certainly ahead, incidentally. Incidentally, here's another kind of bizarre thing about writing this for our thought experiment. Of course, if it hadn't been Trump, maybe Biden wouldn't have suggested the June 27th debate, right? Because it's such a weird thing, such an early debate. Therefore, Biden would be the nominee. What does a Nikki Haley, Joe Biden race look like at this point? Which is entirely possible alternate history, right? And instead, we have Trump and Harris. So maybe in this case, these contingent events, the gods decided to do a favor for the United States of America.
God willing, your lips to the God's ears and back on down, I guess. I have a little bit of clarity on this Monday morning. Sometimes it's tough when you're in the muck to know what is landing, what is breaking through, what is just stuff that political obsessives are talking about, and what it's. I did Ponce of America last week, and John Lovett asked me, he's like, "Is this one going to break through?" And I'm like, "I don't fucking know what's going to break through." It's hard in the moment to tell. Except for in extreme circumstances. But with a little bit of distance, I do think that the last 2 weeks have been really bad for him. And starting and really formulated around MSG, but all of this other stuff, the threats of violence, the John Kelly, it just has been an inverse of 2016 and 2020 in the information environment. We've seen numbers showing that late deciding voters are breaking for Harris. Saw it in Iowa. Pluff saying that internal says that. Cohn said that his New York Times Siena poll said that. And then we had this, my favorite story of the weekend. Huffington Post went to a supermarket in a Puerto Rican neighborhood in Pennsylvania. They're interviewing people coming in and out of the supermarket. And they interviewed one person who said that they saw Trump's decision to pose in a garbage truck at a campaign stop as an additional insult. If he didn't have nothing to do with it, what's he doing in the garbage truck? Pacheco asked. I love this story so much. It's this too cute by half effort to try to do a triple bank shot attack. It's really Biden calling you garbage. No one got that except for viewers of The Five on Fox. Regular people are just seeing the pictures of Trump in the garbage truck and connecting it to the Puerto Rico garbage joke, which really gives me a lot of pleasure.
Yeah, no, that's a wonderful story. I was struck by that too. No, and I think Trump's been dominating the news for the last 10 days. And in that respect, Harris is probably wise, don't you think, to get back to what we started with, to simply have a positive message at the very end. I hope some of the other groups are reminding people about Dobbs and about a few other things about Trump's agenda, the economic, even the downside of his economic agenda. But Harris herself should be upbeat.
Longtime listeners of the podcast know that, well, I'm not really a pet man. A pet of sorts adopted our family recently. The name was Aretha because the cat came up onto our front porch as we were blaring Aretha Franklin one morning. We later found out that the cat is a boy, so it's a boy named Aretha. But ever since then, he's been coming around, trying to eat some little snacks, hang out, cuddle up on the Barca Lounger. And that cat has never been happier than when we turned from the random cat food that we were buying at the store for it and upgraded to Smalls. Smalls cat food is protein-packed with preservative-free ingredients you'd find in your fridge, and it's delivered right to your door. That's why Cats.com named Smalls their best overall cat food. Smalls was started back in 2017 by a couple of guys home cooking cat food in small batches with their friends. A few short years later, they've served millions of meals to cats all across the United States. For me, another big plus for it. It's not just that Aretha likes it, not just that the neighborhood cat is happier now, but the smell is much more pleasant. I mean, you can just sense that the Smalls cat food has real food and ingredients in there. It's not stinking up the front porch. And, that's a win for everybody. So, after switching to Smalls, 88% of cat owners reported having overall health improvements. That's a big deal. The team at Smalls is so confident your cat will love their product that you can try it risk-free. That means they will refund you if your cat won't eat their food. So, give your cat the gift of great cat food this holiday season. Head to smalls.com/thebulwark and use promo code THEBULWARK at checkout for 50% off your first order plus free shipping. That's the best offer you'll find, but you have to use my code THEBULWARK for 50% off your first order. One last time, that's promo code THEBULWARK for 50% off your first order plus free shipping. Hey, y'all, if you love this podcast and want to listen to all Bulwark podcasts ad-free, join Bulwark Plus today. You can click the link in this description. You'll get the best politics newsletters in the business, and you can become a Bulwark Plus member right now. We'd appreciate it. I think that's right. I want to get to your final prediction. I hope you're ready. I hope you're prepared for that. I didn't prep you. I want to get to your final exhortation, but I do want to do. I felt like I left a little bit on the bone with Mehdi Hassan on Friday on this topic. Not the Gaza protesters. We covered that pretty fulsomely. It's Jeffrey Epstein and Trump.
Yeah,
because I just like. It is wild. I like the if you spend any time in the manosphere or the conservative, right-wing media world, there's like this obsession over that there's some deep state Jeffrey Epstein conspiracy that the Clintons are involved and who knows, like the Frazzle drip and all of the the pizza and John Podesta, who the hell knows who's involved with this, Bill Gates. And yet Donald Trump was president when Epstein was killed. He was in federal custody, which was run by Bill Barr, whose former law firm had some connections to Epstein. And then we've had two stories over the last 2 weeks about Trump's connections with Epstein. One was a woman talking about her experience with Epstein and Trump. And then over the weekend, we had Michael Wolff releasing some tapes of Epstein himself talking about Trump. I want to listen to both of those back to back.
When Jeffrey looked at me and said, let's go stop by and see Trump. And so we went to Trump Tower and went up the elevator, and moments later, Trump was greeting us, and he pulled me into him and started groping me. He put his hands all over my breasts, my waist, my butt. And I froze. And I froze because I was so deeply confused.
So how do you know this?
That was Donald's best friend for 10 years. That was Epstein responding to Wolf there at the end. I guess I have two thoughts. All of the Trump sexual assault stories are the same, So it's like, if you're ever wondering for any evidence about whether are women, is this true, or women making this up, or like whatever, are they just trying to get attention? It's like everything is all of everyone's stories is exactly the same. They're independent of each other, and they're all exactly the same as how Trump described the way that he treats women in the Access Hollywood tape. And so to have that just grotesque behavior tied to his continued evidence of an extensive relationship with Epstein, I don't know. Feels like that should be another major thing that people are talking about. Seems as important as the Comey letter to me, I guess, as for a final for the final week of the campaign.
And maybe it is affecting women, senior votes, including especially senior women. I mean, these women whom he was groping are, in some cases, this was 20 years ago, and they're now in their 40s, 50s, or something like that, 60s. And I don't know. People have had, women of my age have had similar experiences, I believe, in their, 40, 50 years ago, in their work careers and in their social career lives. And I wonder how much of that is kicking in a little bit beneath the surface. That fantastic Julia Roberts ad that the right went crazy about, where, she's encouraging women to vote as they wish in the privacy of the voting booth, and perhaps they don't have to tell their husbands how they voted. And I love the right's going crazy about that. I thought didn't you think it was very revealing somehow? It was so disproportionate and nuts, basically. It's like, who's ever heard of such a thing? I mean, the American family is going to crater if one spouse isn't entirely honest with the other. Like, what world have they been living in?
Yeah. And this idea, it's kind of also about control.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
The Harris campaign rolling out some new ads targeting Donald Trump. Let's roll the first one.
Never before has there been such a danger to America. A creature with orange leathery skin looms in the shadow, coming to destroy democracy.
You're not going to be a dictator, are you? I said no, other than day one.
Raising prices for families.
100, 200, 2,000% tariff.
Spreading racist lies.
They're eating the dogs, the people that came in. They're eating the cats.
Admiring dictators.
Able to deal with Putin and Kim Jong-un and all of the people the very fine people you have to deal with.
Don't believe us? Ask his own staff. Trump asked me to put him over my oath. Anyone who puts himself over the Constitution should never be president. God help us, a total fascist. This creature vies for total unchecked power. Vote Harris Walls to stop him.
All right, folks, that's one of those ads. Let's see the second one.
For too long, a cloud has hovered over this country. One of division and fear. Fear of each other. Fear of our differences. He tried to turn us against each other, to normalize violence and hate. But we know who we are. We are Americans. We love this country, and while we may not all share politics or geography, we know the time has come for common sense and common ground. For a leader who holds true to our ideals that all are created equal, and the American dream belongs to each of us. That having a home, making a family, living one's golden years in health and security must not be a privilege for some, but a right for all. And while the fabric of this nation may be tattered, we can mend it together. One family, one community, one vote at a time. It's a new day rising, one of unity and hope, of a shared belief in what's possible when we remember who we are, the greatest nation on earth, America.
All right, here's a pretty good ad the folks at the Midas Touch put together.
We're
effectively run in this country by a bunch of childless cat ladies.
We are not going back.
Oh, that was excellent.
The folks at Vote Vets have really been emphasizing Donald Trump, how scary he would be for the military. And so here's what they just released.
Put on Pavarotti singing Ave Maria. Nice and loud. Turn it up louder. We want a little action here. Turn it up louder. This American carnage stops right here and stops right now. You also had people that were very fine people on both sides. During my 4 years, nothing happened, and there was great pressure on me having to do with guns. We did nothing. We didn't yield. They're poisoning the blood of our country. That's what they've done. I got rid of Roe v. Wade. We have a woke military. My call was perfect. And then I said, supposing you brought the light inside the body. Yeah, no, I don't take responsibility at all.
I just want to find 11,780 votes, which is one more than we have.
Proud Boys, stand back and stand by. And we're going to the Capitol. You have to get your people to fight. And we fight. We fight like hell. What the hell do you have to lose?
Trump may not remember, but we can never forget.
All right, folks, here is the Don Winslow. He's a progressive book author. He is a book author, big supporter of Vice President Kamala Harris, hates Donald Trump, and he self-financed this ad.
I accept your nomination to be President of the United States of America. Do we believe in freedom? Do we believe in opportunity? Do we believe in the promise of America? And are we ready to fight for it? And when we fight, we win. God bless you. God bless you.
I love you so much, but when we fight, we win.
And I pledge to be a president for all Americans. Good evening, America! And when we fight, we win.
All right, folks. If we have the Lincoln Project ad, which shows Donald's absolute distaste and distrust of women.
And the first word she heard was the word
The C word. Every woman has heard it. From the angry ex. From the asshole boss. It's not a joke to us. But it is to Trump and Elon.
The pro-Trump super PAC launched by Elon Musk posted and then deleted.
Kamala Harris is a C word. You heard that right. A big old C word.
They even end it with see you next Tuesday. Well, for once, they're right.
Let's go to our panel. Of course, Derek, Matt, and Michael. Listen, people talk about, hey, ads don't matter. The point of a lot of these is really to focus on going viral. And we're going to pull up one more. It's not an actual ad, though. A lot of young women, Matt, on TikTok are recirculating the Access Hollywood tape from 2016, where Donald Trump talked about in a shameful way the treatment of women. Now, if you've got women who are 20 years old now, that comes out. They were 12 years old in 2016. And so this thing all of a sudden is flying on social media, flying around on TikTok, and these young women are hearing what Donald Trump had to say. This is the kind of thing that I do believe is having a tremendous impact of driving young women to the polls. And we're seeing it in the early voting data.
Yeah, see also the E. Jean Carroll allegations were from the 90s or the late 80s. So obviously, or I think it was the 90s. Let me not speak incorrectly. But that, buttresses that is a pattern of conduct, right? That's the kind of thing that somebody's been doing for years. And you get caught on a tape, surreptitiously thinking you're not being recorded, saying something as abhorrent as he did. So I think you're right. I think those women from 8 years ago who are 20-year-olds now, or were even 10-year-olds then, or 18-year-olds now voting in their first election, will not forget those things. What I wanted to say about the ads, though, I think sometimes they are a little bit superfluous, especially at this stage. However, I think a couple of them are particularly important, and I thought it was very clever, the one about the creature from the Orange Lagoon, because I know the Atlantic reported yesterday that in Pennsylvania in particular, the early voting numbers show, I think, a 5% lead for Vice President Harris, and that was a 5% lead for Mr. Trump, I believe, a week ago. So there's very clearly a groundswell, and that, to be particular, that 5% lead is in voters 65 or older. And that's important because that's a demographic that I think customarily has gone to the Republicans voting in early voting, but it's going the other way for Vice President Harris right now. I think that's a very good sign. And I think maybe the ads are one of the things that plays into that. But moreover, one of the other things I want to mention is that I think the most effective of any of these ads are the ads where they just put back-to-back very caustic things that Trump has said, because what you very often see, and what you're seeing from his team right now with the Liz Cheney comments, is they try to one-off everything. But the thing about it is Mr. Trump continues to say hateful things and has for 40 years at this point. And when you string them all together, it is very hard to make any kind of cognizable defense against that. I mean, if you are voting for Trump, you are doing so in spite of a overwhelming body of evidence of hateful rhetoric and continued hateful rhetoric. So I think those ads are particularly effective. And if there are anybody out there who's actually still on the fence, that's what I think would push them over the balance to not vote for Mr. Trump and to vote for Vice President Harris.
I brought up the Access Hollywood tape, and we're going to try to find one of these TikTok videos. And Carol, what I saw, it was two young women who were sitting next to each other. They were listening to the tape. And so if y'all could find that video and we could play it, please do so. Also, Michael, a video that was circulating, Donald Trump when he testified before Congress, where he was trying to stop the expansion of Native American casinos. And he was like, well, these people, they don't look Native American. And again, showing how racist he has always been.
Absolutely. White supremacist, racist to the core. I heard this morning on MSNBC them talking about Gen Z finding out about the Access Hollywood tape and how they've been circulating on social media. And I didn't even realize that they didn't know about the Access Hollywood tape. You know, a lot of times, certain things we just take for granted, even though because it's been shown ad nauseum, right? We just think everybody knows about it. But they're finding out about that, and they're coming away realizing, putting all this into perspective. And at the same time, he bragged about taking away a woman's right to choose what she does with her body and overturning Roe versus Wade. But the commercial, and I know you probably talked about it here on the show earlier this week, Roland, but the commercial, I think, is really pissing off MAGA. And Jesse Waters talked about it on Fox News. Is the commercial where you have it's saying that women, you don't have to tell your husband who you voted for. And when you're in the voting booth, you know, that's a private matter. So he said that a woman who doesn't vote the way her husband votes, that's like cheating on her husband. OK, this is how sick these people are. These people are back in the 1950s and really trying to take us back to the 1850s. So
Oh yeah.
These people have to be defeated, but you listen to them. You listen to them, and it's like, where did these people come from? What type of upbringing did they have to think of women like that, dehumanize women like that? So this is another reason why elections have consequences.
Derek, what Derek, I'll tell you, is very interesting when we talk about that. Guys, let me know control when y'all have that ad. I think we ran it the other day, and man, these folks on the right wing were pissed off. And there's this idiot, this black dude. He's on named Delano something. He's stupid. Delano Squires, and so he took exception to me criticizing Republicans whining about that. And these dudes are so-called Christians, and they really believe women should stay in their place. And they really, because I was criticizing this one pastor who said that women should be following the lead and voting like their husbands. But they are upset. Yeah, Charlie Kirk was foaming at the mouth on Megyn Kelly's show. And you would have thought Megyn Kelly would have checked him on that, but of course she's been kissing Donald Trump's ass so much you think she's a member of the family now. But it goes to show you, how effective these ads are. And what's interesting is that women I've been seeing these all across social media. They've been leaving Post-it notes in women's restrooms all around the country in stalls saying your vote is private. You don't have to vote with your husband. And look, that's low key guerrilla tactics. But the bottom line is, in a margin election, you take whatever you can get.
Roland, you're exactly right. These ads are very effective. They're so effective that you have individuals like LeBron James that makes an endorsement and roll in some of these ads. The other benefit, you have these young ladies on TikTok. Again, they roll in these ads, and they have this one in particular that has gone viral the last 24 to 48 hours. It says, my vote will cancel out my dad's vote or my brother's vote or my uncle's vote. And this thing has gone viral. And so the benefit of these ads is clearly to get underneath Trump's campaign team and those who following Trump. But more importantly, these ads are demonstrating how quick and nimble the Kamala Harris campaign team is to get this out on social media, so that way it can penetrate TikTok, Instagram, Facebook, X, and all these various platforms with her message, and to really paint the picture how very different these two presidential candidates are.
Absolutely. Do we have, guys, do we have that ad, the women voting in private ad? Do we have that?
And one other thing I would add, Roland, as a retired naval officer, you've seen other organizations outside of the campaign team who are also bringing their voice when it comes to these ads. How they're saying how Trump is not only unfit and unqualified to ever stand behind the seal, but to be commander-in-chief, especially when he made the comment that he's going to use the military to round up citizens. And he crossed the line when he said that. And then military vets came out with their ad.
All right, let's roll that ad, y'all.
Still voting for him?
Hell yeah.
What about your wife?
She doesn't like him, but she's voting for him.
Same with mine.
All right, so control room, I sent y'all another one, if y'all could pull that. So that one was a Lincoln Project ad. So if y'all could pull this next one, Julia Roberts actually voiced an ad. And just so y'all know, I'm sitting here, I typed in YouTube, you type in women voting against husband. So you see this piece in the Washington Examiner, conservative paper. Julia Roberts under fire for inviting women to vote differently than their husbands. Then you see Charlie Kirk and Jesse Waters at Fox News upset. This was Sky News Australia, owned by Rupert Murdoch. Tacky Harris campaign ad presents a negative approach. Greg Gutfield is upset. White nationalist Matt Walsh, who's absolutely a sexist. This Democrat ad is the most vile. I love this here. This Democrat ad is the most vile anti-family campaign ever. These white men are so mad and upset that they are losing their minds because they actually believe it. Look, that was a story I saw 2 weeks ago where a woman said, this is the first time I voted in my life because my husband would not let me vote. She said, but he dead now and I'm voting. So if y'all have the Julia Roberts ad, go ahead and roll it.
Before we roll this ad, let's look at some news. Some conservatives don't believe men silence women's votes at the polls. These 18 stories are proving otherwise. Oh wow, okay, this is gonna be interesting. Let's look at the actual article. Recently, an 81 woman went viral for casting her first ever vote for after her husband, who passed away last year, did not think she should. I'm going to vote for the first time in my life. Wow. Being disenfranchised. People have so many reactions. Some couldn't believe this is still happening in 2024. Others noted it's probably more common than we think. Notably, many reminded women they have a right to a private vote. You do not tell your husband or boyfriend who you voted for. He will not and cannot find out who you voted for unless you tell him. It is your vote. Let's see. Whether or not a significant number of men influence votes for women in their lives has been a decades-long debate, but this election cycle, especially with reproductive rights on the line, the conversation has reemerged. Some voters started placing secret notes in bathroom stalls urging women that they have the right to a private vote. Interesting. We just watched that ad. That was a good ad. The ad sparked outrage. Fox News host Jesse Waters said if he found out his wife was voting for Harris, it'd be the same thing as having an affair. Once we called the ad condescending, suggesting Democrats think marriage are stuck in the 1950s. So, well, we don't have any evidence or data against this. People sharing their anecdotal stories are still very relevant, which means it is happening at some level. And if it's happening at some smaller level, you would expect that it's probably happening at an even larger level. So, yeah, women, you can get out and vote for who you want to vote for, regardless of what your husband says. Look, the conservative side is the more misogynistic side, let's just be honest. So I think if the ad is basically helping women get the strength to vote for who they want to vote or gather the strength, then yeah, it's a good ad. Charlie Kirk said the ad was nauseating, suggesting that the husband was probably working hard to afford his wife's lifestyle only to be betrayed by voting for Harris. It's not a betrayal, man. It's called disenfranchisement if you don't let her vote for who they should vote for. Like, why would you? If you guys are so wrapped up in politics that you think it's cheating to vote for the candidate that you agree with, then you were in the 1950s. I phoned bank for Harris, and this ish happens to all the time. God awful husbands swearing up and down no Democrats live there when the wife is Democrat. Women who whisper I agree with you and hang up the phone because they don't want their MAGA lunatic husbands to hear. Wow. Because so many people find it hard that men could be suppressing women's votes, I asked the BuzzFeed community to share experience of witnessing or personally facing attempts by men to control or silence their votes. Here's everything they shared. Trump versus Clinton, my not-so-savory older brother tried to control me and my older sister's vote by demanding we vote for Trump. His threat, you vote for Hillary, I will disown you both. My sister and I took one look at each other and knew he wasn't going to force us to do what we wanted. She and I happily went to the vote alone and cast our votes for whomever we wanted. I once requested a mail-in ballot because I was going to be out of town on voting day. When the ballot arrived, my husband filled it out. I asked why he would do that, and he responded that we vote the same anyway. Wow, that's just not true. It should not be true either. Anyways, I knew a man who refused to drive his elderly mother to vote, all because she wanted to vote for Hillary and not Trump in 2016. The same man's wife said that he didn't want to vote for Trump after Access Hollywood tape came out, but that she would because her husband insisted. In 2016, my significant other broke up with me because I would not let him tell me how to vote. No woman needs a man to tell her how to vote. My father, he said, and I quote, the downfall of this country was when they gave women the right to vote because women are too stupid to know how to vote. If left on their own, they will vote Democrat. That's why women have to be told by their husbands how to vote correctly, which is Republican. I vote straight Republican on my ticket. If my parents went to vote, my father would interrogate my mother when they got back to the vehicle. This is sick. This is horrible and sick. My husband doesn't believe that anyone should vote. He thinks it's all controlled by the Vatican or Freemasons. He doesn't want me to vote. I already filled an absentee mail-in ballot and put in a special lockbox. He will be very angry if he knew. Wow. It's insane. My youngest sister is 25 and until recently has lived with my father. She has never voted because he has constantly threatened to kick her out if she did. He's Republican and knew she wasn't. This election is the first she will ever vote in. I'll never forget my dad proudly announcing he voted Brexit, and your mother did too. The look on her face said that she had no control over it despite the harsh effect on my job and plans. My grandmother's grandmother was that's a word, suffragette, or I never heard of that word before. Her family put her in an asylum for that, where she committed suicide. Wow. 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 That is heartbreaking and just almost unbelievable. 4 years ago, I decided to get involved with the election administration. I run a polling place in Texas, and I'd say one of the most common things I have to tell couples is that they can't converse, pass notes, or literally stand behind one another while voting. They also shouldn't look at each other's ballots before putting them in the scanner. This is law, but men have become belligerent when I ask them politely. Wow, because they want to control the vote. This is very evidential. I think we should probably figure out a way to get a full poll on this. During the 2008 election, my then husband printed out a list of all Republican candidates to vote for down the ballot and handed it to me as I walked to my booth. I did not commit to a party. I vote for who I want. Every time my mother voted, my father told her to vote the way he did. He told her that he didn't want her vote to cancel his vote. Of course, nobody knows if she really followed his instructions, but she most likely did. My husband told me I should not vote because I am ignorant of the issues. I am not ignorant because I do not follow Fox News 24/7. Also, if he finds out that I voted behind his back, our home will experience silence for however long it takes for him to calm down, further indicating that it could possibly lead to a divorce. Yeesh. 2016 and 2020, and this year, my partner at the time, as well as my father, have tried to convince me to vote against my beliefs. I have voted in every election because they have tried so hard to get me to vote their way. The funny thing is, they never voted. They called me names and tried telling me misinformation to sway my vote, and sometimes it was scary. Even now, my registration is hidden where only I know, so I can guarantee my vote. Vote because this battle will never end unless we do something. Unfortunately, yes, I listened to my then ex-husband on who I should vote for. Now he's my ex. Wow. My husband and I worked the polls in Pennsylvania. He was a judge of elections. Our husband wanted to go in the booth with his wife, but by law wasn't noted on her voter registration, so she thought she could not vote. My husband took her to the sample setup and showed her how to do it, and she went into the booth to vote. She came out so proud and said that was the first time she ever voted and would continue to do so from now on. She was in her 60s. One of my grandmothers couldn't vote during her marriage because if she didn't vote the same as my grandfather, it would cancel out his vote. Thankfully, she enjoyed the freedom to vote, however she damn well pleased after she divorced him. Wow. Long one. A couple years ago, my husband discovered some videos by misogynistic men on the internet. They appealed to him because he's always had control issues. These podcasters also tend to lean right. Of course, that's what did I say? The misogynistic party. These podcasters also tend to lean right, even extreme right. He fell victim to their influence and now believes everything he hears. He was constantly trying to shove it down my throat and force me to believe what he believed. Since the election cycle began, it's been tenfold worse. He tries to force me to watch these things with him. He's constantly lecturing me about who is better for this country and tries to get me to agree. He's played the victim when I tell him I don't want to talk politics. He doesn't want to hear my thoughts and then yells over me. He expects me to back him up as his wife without regard for my thoughts and opinions. Oddly, I got him to admit that he just wants to control me, but I think he realizes he can't, even though he still tries. So there it is. Yeah. Men do indeed, based on this article in a small poll, try to control their women's votes. Not all. Not all men. That phrase. But yeah, to some extent, that's what they do. That's what these men do. They try to get their women to vote the same way they do.
All right, y'all don't have it yet. Let me know when y'all have it. But again, Matt, this is what these ads do work, because what it's doing is you're not focused necessarily on trying to get on television, but if you're able to, again, drive this on social and it gets picked up and it goes viral and it's on Instagram and it's being shared and liked, whatever, it changes the game.
Yeah, I think it does. And I think, I said superfluous earlier. That's not the right word. I think what I'm trying to say is at this stage, I would think people would have their mind made up. But for those who don't, I do think that they're powerful, especially like Derek spoke to. Anything I've seen that is, a commercial where it's vets that are denouncing Mr. Trump, I think are particularly effective, especially when you have somebody coming in, who's going to be a fascist if military people are saying he's not the right guy. Now, let me first say, I'm not giving legal advice, but please don't go to the polls and talk to anybody else casting a vote. Don't get yourself arrested. I get the sentiment, and I like that from the Lincoln Project ad, but, obviously you don't want to be talking to anybody at the polls. But I do think that's effective. And I think it's crazy that in 2024, we're still having conversations about women as property, because that's ultimately what this comes down to. There's a large contingent of men who think that their wife is essentially their property, or at least that they can control, her decisions. And obviously women are autonomous. And not only that, women vote in higher proportions than men do. So clearly, they are making informed decisions. And it's crazy that you'd have somebody like that woman saying, this is the first time I'm going to vote because my husband wouldn't let me. That's absurd, but unfortunately some people's reality. So I'm glad it's being called out. And I'm glad that women are mobilizing, as they always do, in this election, because that's going to be what tips the balance. In fact, I have a local colleague who's running for local DA, and he is convinced that Vice President Harris is going to win gangbusters because particularly the percentage of women who have come out to vote in early voting in our local county. He's just, screaming it from the rooftops, and he's very excited about those numbers. So if that tracks nationally, we should see a landslide. And I don't know that that will happen in a margin race, but he's a pretty smart guy and he knows elections very well. So that's his prediction, and it's interesting to hear that at this juncture.
All right, let's go ahead and pause for a little bit. I'll be right back. let's get back into it. TYT. So I already know I caught Cenk when he talked about the closing polls or the poll from Iowa on his live because it was such a shocking poll. So let's see what they have to say on the official show.
Earthquake, tsunami. That is how the U.S. political world is describing a staggering poll that came out over the weekend in Iowa, a red state. The survey for the Des Moines Register by respected pollster Ann Seltzer prompted this headline. Iowa poll, Kamala Harris leapfrogs Donald Trump to take lead near Election Day. Here's how. A new Des Moines Register Mediacom Iowa poll shows Vice President Harris leading former President Trump 47 to 44% among likely voters just days before a high-stakes election that appears deadlocked in key battleground states. The results follow a September Iowa poll that showed Trump with a 4-point lead over Harris, and a June Iowa poll showing him with an 18-point lead over Democrat President Joe Biden, who was a presumptive Democratic nominee at the time. Ann Seltzer, who put together this poll, she then went on television a lot, and she explained the 47-44 margin for Harris this way.
Digging into the data, we determined that it wasn't people switching positions. It was new people, perhaps a bigger pool of people, deciding to vote. And at that time, our definition of a likely voter was somebody who tells us they will definitely vote. And the numbers were especially notable among older people, among women, and among college graduates. These are all groups that are tilting toward Harris. So it seemed like there was a get off the bench moment.
A separate poll conducted by Emerson finds that Donald Trump is ahead in Iowa by 10. So what's the difference? Well, Ann Seltzer said that Emerson, and she kind of rained on Emerson in another media appearance, Emerson started with their assumptions and started with a model about what the turnout would be for various demographic groups, including women and older voters. Seltzer said she, by contrast, surveyed that to come up with her model about what the demographics and the participation would be in the election. So women are breaking for Harris by double digits, according to Seltzer. And even if double digit is the lead that Donald Trump has with men in Iowa, because women are coming in as a much larger percentage of the electorate, 55, 56%, that helps explain why Harris, according to Seltzer, is winning Iowa, state that Donald Trump is supposed to win. Now, Ann Seltzer's survey has caused heartache and heartburn for MAGA world because, again, if women are turning in higher percentages for Harris and they're a higher percentage of the electorate, then the pre-election polls, most of the polls are wrong. And according to the latest New York Times Siena poll, late deciders are coming in 55% for Harris, 44% for Trump. And the 8% of the electorate, this is what 8% of the electorate makes up the decision late. Again, they're breaking for Harris by, you're looking at it 11 points. The polling comes as more than 70 million Americans have already voted, according to the University of Florida Election Lab. Roughly 40% of those surveyed by the Times Siena poll across the 7 battleground states said they had already voted. Harris wins those voters by a margin of 8 percentage points, the polls found. Trump has an edge among voters who say they are highly likely to vote, but have not yet cast a ballot. So the question is, will the voters who have yet to cast a ballot, will they be able to erase the margins for Trump that Harris has already accumulated? In other words, will more Trump voters show up on Election Day? And usually that's the case based on 2020 and also 2016, is that early voters favor the Democrats, late voters favor the Republicans. But will Donald Trump be able to run up his numbers in enough of these states on Election Day to make up what appears to be a Harris lead?
I don't think so.
And some interesting information about early voting. In North Carolina, for example, the election already has 59% voter participation before Election Day. In 2020, the overall participation in North Carolina was 72%. There was also something like 16 to 17% of the electorate that voted on Election Day. So again, the question becomes, what percentage is voting on Election Day? Does that number still withstand the Harris lead, or is it something that turns the numbers back around towards Donald Trump? According to a number of, now back to the Iowa poll, because according to a number of strategists, it's more than just Iowa that is at stake if in fact Ann Seltzer is correct. If she is correct, and women are a larger part of the electorate, and there's a greater percentage of older voters that are polling for Harris than for Donald Trump, well, that could have an impact not just in Iowa, but in a lot of other states as well. And in fact, in Kansas, There's a poll that shows Donald Trump won Kansas by 14 points in 2020. He's only ahead of Kamala Harris by 4. So there is a suggestion here that perhaps Ann Seltzer is onto something, and that has led to some remarkable pronouncements by some former Republican strategists, including Mark McKinnon on CNN.
She's been the most reliable pollster that I've ever worked with in my career, and I've worked with a lot of them. So if directionally she's right, and Trump just wins Iowa by a lot less than we thought he was going to, that just has huge consequences for the actual swing states. So again, I think if Seltzer's half right about Iowa, I think Harris could win all 7 swing states. So I'll just say it now. I know you're not in the prediction business, but I'm getting in it. Harris is going to blow the doors off. And it's going to be because of women and the granny gap.
Because of women and the granny gap. And of course, it could apply not just to Iowa, but also to Wisconsin and Michigan and other Midwestern battleground states. And by the way, I mentioned Kansas a moment ago. Kansas was one of those states that had an abortion ballot that was essentially up for a referendum to try to further restrict abortion after the Supreme Court Dobbs decision. That was rejected by the voters. They rejected the abortion restrictions. Abortion restrictions have been defeated in every state where they've been on the ballot. So even Republican states, women have come out and said, no, we're not going to have this, and they voted against it. Also, in special elections, for the last 2 years since the Supreme Court Dobbs decision, Democrats have outperformed in congressional elections and special elections and state and local elections that they were expected to lose or be close. They have outperformed the pre-election polling and the expectations, which suggests that women are a bigger part of this electorate than they would have been had it not been for the Supreme Court decision 2 years ago. Now, there's one other thing to keep in mind in all of this. We talk about overperforming compared to the polls. Somebody else who has overperformed repeatedly in his elections, Donald Trump. He was expected to lose some of these battleground states to Joe Biden by much greater margins than he actually did. And so the lingering question out there is, are there enough people out there who do not want to admit to pollsters and surveys that, yes, they're pulling the lever for Donald Trump? Will that number essentially mean that Donald Trump's expected final result will be higher than the polls suggest? And we will soon find out. Jack?
Okay, I've got even more information that's late breaking in a second for you guys. But first, let me begin to break this down. This election is not necessarily going to be the closest. There's been some unbelievably close elections. Obviously, 2000 Bush v. Gore, separated by a couple hundred votes in Florida, and then 43,000 votes in the 3 swing states in the last election made the difference. So I don't know that this is going to be the closest. In fact, at the end of the day, as David's pointing out, it might not even be that close, especially in the Electoral College. But what it is the most unpredictable election of my lifetime. It's for the 2 reasons that David explained there. So in 2016 and 2020, Donald Trump got all of these unexpected voters, and even in the states that Joe Biden won, Michigan and Wisconsin, for example, he had around an 8-point lead and barely wound up winning them by about 0.6. So tons of unexpected voters came in for Donald Trump, and I've explained that phenomenon for the last 8 years. No one in mainstream media wants to hear it, and they still don't understand it. It's people who don't normally vote going, oh, there's someone that's against the system? Well, I hate this system. I'm going to show up and vote for that guy. Now, I think, of course, Donald Trump's a fake populist. You've heard me say that a million times, but that is what's driving that. On the other hand, in 2022 and 23, a ton of unexpected women voters showed up, and the Democrats did better than expected, which hadn't happened in a long time. So what we're in is a battle of unexpected voters. Which side is going to have more unexpected voters? So when we look at that, well, a couple of data points that David just shared with you stick out to me as the most relevant. The late deciders breaking 11% in favor of Kamala Harris is a big deal, because now we're no longer talking about polling and the assumptions that those different pollsters make when it comes to their polling. Now we're talking about actual votes, right? And if she's winning by 11% in people who actually voted already, well, that's a big deal. Oh, and especially because in that category, they hadn't made up their mind until very recently. So they're breaking towards her. We're not talking about the people who are already on the 2 different sides. So score 1 for her on that. And then to me, North Carolina was really interesting because Kamala Harris's team pulled out a lot of their ads from North Carolina around a week ago, even less. And that seemed to be signaling surrender there, as that they had lost. And the polling was trending towards Donald Trump in North Carolina. It looked like he was going to put it away. But now, over 50% of the vote is already in. And you know, on election nights, we'll tell you, as the percentage of the vote gets higher, it becomes so much harder for the other side to overcome a lead, because let's say it's 50% of the vote is in and Kamala Harris is up by 8, which is actually the situation in North Carolina, we believe so far based on the information that we have. It's not at all definitive, guys. So if that's true, then Donald Trump would have to win the other 50% by more than 8 points to bring it back to a tie, and then to be able to take the lead, right?
Wow.
So that's a lot of votes to make up. And so I think that if those numbers are true, that's super hard for him to make up. On the other hand, here's a new data point. John Ralston is the most respected reporter in Vegas. He's been covering these elections for a long time. He's been right about a lot of the election results. He kept talking about rural voters coming in at much larger numbers than they normally do in Nevada elections, and that was leaning towards Trump. So he was giving signals throughout that Nevada was headed towards Trump. But here at the last day, he turned around and said, no, based on what he's seeing recently and his intuition and all the other things that go into it, he believes that Kamala Harris is going to pull out Nevada barely by like 0.3% or so. So the two most important demographic groups are both women. It's just two different kinds of women. So one is independent women that are now coming in that Seltzer poll in Iowa at 2-to-1 margin for Kamala Harris.
Yep.
Remember, this is not Democratic women, this is independent women. And now independents outnumber Republicans and Democrats in the country. So which way independents break is super relevant. The late deciders going to Kamala Harris, independent women going to Kamala Harris in giant numbers. And then the last one is potentially the most important, senior women. So that is why Caitlin Collins on CNN reporting that those Iowa numbers came in like a gut punch to the Trump team, because if they're losing senior white women in the numbers that they're losing them in Iowa, if that poll is accurate, oh boy, then they're in a lot of trouble. And they're bleeding out senior voters in ways that people didn't expect. Meanwhile, this election is so topsy-turvy. We're in the middle of a transition. The parties are transitioning, the voters are transitioning. So Trump is picking up a lot more younger voters who are frustrated with the Democratic Party and Kamala Harris and the inability of Democrats to ever get anything done. On the other hand, the Democrats are picking up a lot of senior voters who are worried about Donald Trump's instability and his attacks on the Constitution and democracy. So at the end of all of that, with now less than a day to go, I'm at, I don't know. And I think that everybody should be at, I don't know. I think both sides are overconfident. Those unexpected voters from Trump can still show up, just like they did in the last 2 presidential elections. And those unexpected women voters are already showing up. And the question is, to what degree does that cavalry arrive? Is it a normal size election, a little bit more than normal, or do they show up in giant numbers?
I'm so glad you mentioned younger voters, because one of the things that Ann Seltzer pointed out is that the share of the Iowa electorate, when you look at older voters and younger voters, was much more sort of weighted, she found, towards older voters. People over 65 were turning out in a greater participation than a lot of people had thought, and people who are younger voters, 25 and younger, were turning out a much less number than a lot of people had thought. And if you go through some of the pre-election polls that have been done over the last couple of weeks, especially, so there's that in Iowa. If you go over the pre-election polls, especially some of the Republican paid-for polls that are out there that, in my view, are not scientific or statistically significant in the least, but a lot of them used a model that suggested, okay, we'll take the number from 2020 that will have women will be something like 53, 54% of the electorate. Okay, that's fine, except that in some of these battleground states, North Carolina, Georgia, Michigan, Wisconsin not so much, but Michigan, you're looking at numbers of 55, 56% women in terms of the overall makeup of the election. And so when you have that 1 to 2 percentage point difference in terms of the overall participation, and you have a larger pool of women, and you already have women who are voting for Harris over Trump as you said, by 15, 20 points, that's where the difference becomes. And that is there's not enough male voters, even if they're supporting Donald Trump in the same way that women are supporting Kamala Harris. There's just not enough men to make up that gap. And then likewise, you add to the mix, if people over 65 are breaking for Harris in the way that they're breaking in Iowa, and you don't have the younger turnout that a lot of these pre-election polls suggested, then that means these pre-election polls were wrong. And I think the other piece about it is we know there are some of these pre-election polls that were done by Republicans that were part of a strategy by the Trump campaign to be able to say, look, the election was stolen if I lost, because look at the pre-election polls. I was winning all these states. There's no way I could have lost unless the Democrats stole it. And I think there are some organizations, some fly-by-night organizations that decided to participate in this and to essentially cook the books to try to help Donald Trump and perhaps give more enthusiasm to Republicans and depress Democrats. But that also fed into the narrative, because the mainstream news organizations that did essentially a polling average, they included all the numbers. They included every poll in terms of their, real clear politics average of the polling for the states and nationally. And so it had the effect of some of these Trump favoring polls tightening the race and making it seem much closer than it might otherwise have been. So I think, to your point, it's a sort of a chaos election. Nobody really knows, but at least in terms of likely voters who's showing up, the numbers are not matching what some of these pre-election polls had been counting on. And I think that's why you're seeing so much enthusiasm for Kamala Harris and a sense of dread developing in the Trump campaign.
Yeah, so tomorrow our election coverage starts at noon Eastern. Don't miss a minute of it. It's going to be amazing. David's going to be part of Michael Schur, Annika Sparing, John Idarola, et cetera. And we're going to focus right at TYT.com. And at TYT.com, we'll also have all the election news, all the exit polls, all the, hubbub around the long lines, the Republicans claiming fraud, et cetera. But I want to end on a couple of important things here. So to David's point about some of the nonsense polls in there, Real Clear Politics is a place that a lot of people go, but they included 2 nonsense Republican polls at a minimum, maybe 3. And so that skews their average, and that skews the way that people are looking at it. I try to ignore those as much as possible, but still at this late date, the very last polls that came in, most of them have Kamala Harris winning the election overall. But New York Times, CNN, and there's 2 buts there. One is they're all over the place. Some have her holding the blue wall, Michigan, Wisconsin, and Pennsylvania, and others, but losing Nevada and Arizona, North Carolina, Georgia. Others have her winning Wisconsin and Michigan, and Arizona and North Carolina, but not Pennsylvania. So, and they're all over the place. Every poll has different states going to different people. Kamala Harris is winning almost all of them that are not like weirdo jerry-rigged Republican polls. But New York Times Siena poll comes in at the end. She wins overall, but she's tied in Pennsylvania and Michigan. Well, if she doesn't win Pennsylvania and Michigan, she's not going to win. So that leaves us at, it is near impossible to tell. One last thing, the national average has them close. See, that doesn't make any sense either, because if you're close nationally, then the Republican candidate is much, much, much more likely to win. But yet, when you look at the swing states, they're not matching any of the old patterns. And what ultimately decides it is state by state, so the swing states will make all the difference. So that leaves Nate Silver, Frank Luntz, Harry Enton, and myself, for whatever it's worth, all at I don't know, and neither does anyone else. Okay, the people who are usually the most certain are the least certain in this election. But David, it seemed like you might be more certain. Well, I'll give you one thing I am certain about, and then I'm curious about your opinion. Rena Thea on Twitch, one of our members there, wrote in, "Women might save you all." Well, that's definitely true, because if Kamala Harris wins, it will definitely be because the cavalry arrived, and that cavalry is female voters in larger numbers than expected. So that part is clear, but we don't know that that's definitely going to happen, or maybe the Trump voters overwhelm, et cetera. So if she wins, it's because of women voters, but I don't know at this late date whether she's going to win. David, you sounded more confident before we came on air. What's your take?
Yeah, I'm going to go out. I don't think it's so much of a limb because look, I make this decision in part based on what I've seen in some of the crosstabs and some of the percentages of people who have already voted, the way the numbers are coming in. I do think that women, as a percentage of this electorate, it's coming in higher by a percentage point or two than nearly all the pre-election polls. So that favors Kamala Harris. The other part is, if you look back at the last 2 years, every single election, Democrats have outperformed the pre-election polling. Ballot initiatives, special elections, mayoral races. There was a race in Anchorage, Alaska, Republican town that Donald Trump carried by 14 points. This year, the Democrat won by 12. I mean, there just feels like there is this wave of participants that have not previously been counted as likely voters. So my sense, and maybe it's going on a limb, maybe it's overconfidence, maybe it's partly wishful thinking, but my gut tells me that that the polling is wrong, that there's a greater participation of women than anybody had anticipated, that younger voters are not going to turn out for Donald Trump in the way they had been counting on, and that yes, senior voters are breaking harder for Trump. And remember, in the course of 4 years, you get a cohort of 5 or 6 million senior voters who are not voting anymore because they're dead or they're incapacitated. So there's a group that, essentially reshuffles in terms of the older cohort. So to put it bluntly, I think she is going to win 6 of the 7 battleground states. I think some of them will be very close. Nevada and Arizona, very tight. I think North Carolina and Georgia could be tight. Pennsylvania could be tight. But I think you'll have a couple of them that she'll win by 50 or 60,000 votes. And I'm pretty confident, and I know this may be an outlier, I think that by midnight Eastern time on election night, we're going to know that Kamala Harris has won this election. And the only thing that's left is certification and making sure that the ballots are official. But I just think that there are going to be so many states that she's going to win, battleground states, that it's going to be over on election night. That's where I feel it's going.
Okay, strong statement. I like it. At noon Eastern tomorrow on election day, when we start our coverage on tyt.com, I will be forced to make a prediction, and I will. And we're going to ask you guys, our viewers, to make predictions, and whoever is the most accurate will be declared the election champion of the world.
Right.
Now, what does that mean? Nothing outside of you being election champion of the world, but you'll get to brag about it for the rest of the time, that you were the one person who knew best. So that's what we're going to try to determine.
And Jeng, I'm going to add some fun. If I'm wrong, if she does not win 6 of 7 battleground states, suppose she only wins 2 or 3 and it's tight or she loses the election, I will come back on TYT and I will literally eat this paper that I've written some of my data on. I will eat it on live TYT. I will humiliate myself. I will shame myself. I will apologize. I will say, never believe Schuster again. He's wrong. He's an idiot. He's a moron. But I don't think that's going to happen. I think she's going to win and it's going to be a blowout.
I like how strong David's coming in.
Right,
it's
right.
usually my move. Mike, in this case, I'm not at all sure, but David seems very sure. Right. I'm so curious to see if that's going to turn out to be true. I can't wait. So I hope we see you all on election day and see how it actually turns out. So I was recently talking about how trust in media is severely declining. A lot of you guys are just as skeptical.
All right. Okay, so we did some testing. We got the stream going. Got a little pre-election stream thing here. Tomorrow I'm gonna come back and hopefully have a more robust stream. Not that most people will be watching such a new channel, but either way, I'm gonna be on here. I'm gonna be bouncing around between different election predictions. I'll be working, so I won't be talking the entire time, but I'll be coming back periodically. But I want to just provide the space for people to come chill. Hopefully at a less volatile chat where they can have their voice heard a little bit more, since my channel isn't as big. But yeah, until tomorrow when the election starts, I'll catch you guys next time. Peace out.